present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud, and Derek Nimmo in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome. And we have our four regular panelists, Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones. And once again, they're going to try and talk, if they can, for just a minute on the subject that I will give them. And they will try and do that, as usual, without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card in front of me. Let us begin the show with Kenneth Williams. Who better? Kenneth, can you tell us something about what our audience loves? Well, there's one thing that's already been demonstrated when they applaud at the beginning, but other than that, you have 60 seconds to go on that subject, starting now.
Well, they love seeing this battle of wits, as it's been so rightly described by our chairman, under whose benign influence this show...
Derek Nimmo's challenge right away.
He's not benign. He never has been benign, he never will be benign.
And has very little influence.
Very little influence, yes.
And I don't think the audience would agree with that challenge, would you? No, exactly. And I would bow to the superior wisdom of our audience and say, Kenneth, that was an incorrect challenge, so you get a point for a wrong challenge, and you keep the subject, and there are 51.5 seconds left. What our audience loves, starting now.
Among the things they love, of course, are the dulcet tones which belong to that notable raconteur, writer, actor, mime, and brilliant performer. I speak of Kenneth Williams. I don't believe that anyone would want any kind of self-advertising to go on, and I'm not the kind of person to blow.
Clement Freud has challenged.
36 eyes.
Quite right.
So who's counting?
I was.
I don't remember 36 eyes.
Well, you only have to have two, don't you, for goodness sake?
Yes, but we've never actually challenged on I before.
Oh, I see.
And
so 37 would be too many.
37 would definitely be too many.
Ah.
But actually, I know how to get out of this one. There weren't 36 because I was counting as well, so it's an incorrect challenge. Kenneth, you keep the subject with another point, and there are 27 seconds left, starting now.
What our audience love is to hear me burst forth into song. When I sing, I didn't have a bow wow, Daddy wouldn't buy me, and then all that stuff that follows, which of course we be repeating, but I'm not...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of course.
Yes, you did say of course before, I'm afraid, Kenneth, so that is a correct... Listen, you can't have Kenneth all to yourselves for the rest of the show. There are three others, and they've all got something to contribute, and it's Derek Nimmo now with the subject, and 16 seconds, what our audience loves, starting now.
What our audience really loves is to see the competitors...
And Peter Jones a challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes. I think I'd have a swig at the old Coughlintus. Peter Jones, you have a correct challenge, a point for you, and 12 seconds on what our audience loves, starting now.
I'm sure our audience, like all normal Brits, love the Queen and Ken Dodd and sex, violence and bad language. If we are to judge from the programmes we watch on television, which...
Well, I think everybody was so shattered by Peter's remarks that they overlooked the pause that followed them. But, Peter, you kept going until the whistle was blown, which tells us that 60 seconds is up.
Great.
And as you speak at that moment, you get the extra point, and you're in the lead at the end of that round with Kenneth Williams. Peter, will you begin the second round? The subject, queuing at the supermarket. Oh, yes. Obviously something close to everybody's heart, and there are 60 seconds to go on the subject, Peter, starting now.
Well, most of it is quite unnecessary because as soon as there isn't a queue, the manager sends 2 or 3 cashiers off to tea so that a queue forms immediately. They like to encourage that, I think. And it's a great pity because, of course, it makes it much easier to shoplift. In fact, it's easier to shoplift than to actually pay for the goods.
Clement Freud has challenged.
Are you in this?
Repetition
of easier, yes. I think they wanted to continue because they were all living it with Peter.
I think it's depressing that people are just listening for the repeats and not to the substance of what I'm saying. I find that very frustrating.
I know Kenneth felt the same last time when he was going.
Yes.
But let's see what Clement Freud has to say on the subject, with 41 seconds left, queuing at the supermarket, starting now.
I don't mind queues to get into a supermarket so much, but resent deeply that once you're in there, They make you stand in a queue to get out. Otherwise, you have no alternative but to shoplift, as my friend Peter Jones so very rightly told this erudite audience who've been standing in line outside this theatre.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Repetition of standing.
Yes, I don't... No, he said queuing before. He didn't mention the word standing. He said, I don't mind queuing to get in, not standing in the queue to get in.
Really?
Yes.
Took you a long time to work it out.
I had to do a very quick mental rerun of every word he'd said.
Yes, the
And
old
little
photographic
computer-
memory, yes.
The little computer in my... up there, which is called my grey matter.
I knew someone had been tampering with it. I didn't know you'd had an electronic device fitted.
Well, it might. I thought it wasn't obvious. But, Clement, an incorrect challenge. You keep the subject. 21 seconds. Queuing at the supermarket, starting now.
Queues in other parts of the world are diminishing very quickly because they have electronic devices whereby...
Derek Nimmo
He's no
challenge.
longer talking about queues at the supermarket. He's talking about queues with electronic devices in other parts of the world.
in supermarkets.
No, he just said queuing in the other parts of the world. You say queuing at supermarkets?
Of course. It's implied. It is.
Oh,
the
it's
question.
implied. No, it wasn't clear. I'm sorry. So Derek has the subject, and there are
I
14
don't think that piece of machinery is working very well, do you?
queuing at the
really?
supermarket, Derek, starting now.
Me? Oh, I'm queuing at the supermarket, yes, indeed. Sorry.
And Clement Freud challenge.
I thought you were giving it the other
Queuing
way
at the
round.
supermarket. He's talking about himself.
He didn't. He said queuing at the supermarket. I heard it quite distinctly. He started off with queuing at the supermarket. I was listening. 13 seconds, Derek, for you to continue queuing at the supermarket.
Why is it that when you finish queuing at the supermarket, you're always given a trolley with one wheel that only turns left? And you continue to push this wretched thing up and down various queues as you're taking the tins from the shelves and then find oneself...
So Derek Nimmo got a number of points in that round, including for one for speaking as the whistle went, so he's now taken the lead. Peter Jones, will you take the next round? The subject is accepting unwanted presents. Will you tell us something about that subject in the game, starting now?
Well, I always admire the gracious way the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, in fact, most of the royal family, accept obviously unwanted presents, like illuminated addresses and keys to various cities and perhaps models of Buckingham Palace made out of matchsticks or human bones or teeth or whatever. And I often wonder what they do with them when they get them home, because they can't reveal them to the public again after they've accepted them. Otherwise, it would appear that they didn't want them. So I suppose they're put in some vast incinerator in the bowels of the royal residence and are never seen again. But
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of royal.
Yes. I'm
Oh,
afraid
yes,
there was.
royal, yes.
Royal. So, Clement Freud, you have a correct challenge. You have the subject of accepting unwanted presents. There are 22 seconds, starting now.
The one quality which is absolutely essential is grace. Graciously must one accept unwanted presents, and the less wanted they are, the more accent one must give to this quality with which one takes.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
5 ones.
It's
Yes,
five.
you do.
are 5.
5 ones are 5.
Yes, that's right.
And 36 eyes don't count.
I'll do the same to you as I did to Clement, to be fair. There were not 5 ones, there were only 4. So it was an incorrect challenge. No, repetition of 1, all right. 6 seconds, Derek, with you, accepting
Oh, I
unwanted
see.
presents, starting now.
Accepting unwanted presents was not a subject I thought I was going to be given for a curious moment, because he had that funny... Oh.
Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject is other people's bonfires. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Other people's bonfires consist of unwanted presents which they were given by other people. It's really as simple as that. And they burn very much more prettily than does one's own bonfire. If ever you look at what is ablaze in number 32, should you live in number 30, it is higher, burns with a greater incandescence and sparkle, and throws more smoke than anything down the street. Other people's bonfires seem to take place on the 5th of November, which is a particularly opportune date for a bonfire in view of Guy Fawkes' attempt some years previously to blow up the place where I currently work, although if this program goes out in many years' time, I may in fact not be working but doing extraordinarily important things on behalf of the royal family and other members of this team, like...
Derek Nimmo
He's no
challenge.
longer talking about other people's bonfires, he's talking about his future career.
Yes, he had, I think, deviated onto his future career. And we were so carried away with what Clement Freud...
I was wanted to hear
You
what
didn't let him get to the conclusion. That's the point. He was building up to the fact that his career was going to be put on a bonfire. Missed the point entirely. Didn't
No, I'm
have a
sorry,
chance.
Claire.
Well, he had deviated for quite a while, so Derek, your challenge is correct, and you've got him with 3 seconds to go on other people's bonfires, starting...
The best other people's bonfires are those made out of eucalyptic wood.
Oh,
which
Clement Freud challenge.
It's a grammatical
Yeah.
deviation, the best other people's bonfire.
Mathematically correct,
Well done, Clement. 1.5 seconds on other people's bonfires, starting now.
Swan and Vespers.
So Clement Freud, starting with that subject and finishing as well, though in spite of an interruption, has got a number of points, increased his, or bettered his position. He's now in second place, but Derek Nimmo still way out in the lead, and also Derek begins the next round. The subject is fiddling. Derek, will you tell us something about fiddling in just a minute, starting now?
I think some of the most interesting fiddling currently be heard in the home counties is at Stoke Davignon, a very pretty little church which lies near Cobham, because very handy adjacent to that is a school run by Yehudi Menuhin for gifted fiddlers. And I often go along to even service to hear the extraordinary sounds made by these children. That man that I mentioned, the wonderful maestro, why hasn't he been given a knighthood? That's extraordinary, isn't it? When you think the pleasure that he's given for so many years, but one of the times that I enjoyed him fiddling...
Kenneth Williams,
Well,
challenge.
deviation. We're discussing why Yehudi Menuhin hasn't been given a knighthood, which isn't the subject of fiddlers.
I quite
Well,
agree.
it often is, actually.
What, you mean that people...
Yes. I would have thought Yehudi Menuhin hadn't fiddled in the right way.
Well said, Peter, but Kenneth's challenge is correct. He deviated from the subject of fiddling, going on to Yehudi Menuhin's knighthood, our possibilities of such, and there are 27 seconds. Kenneth, for you to take over the subject of fiddling, starting now.
There's an awful lot of it goes on, especially in large corporations or public companies, where they make the phone call, which has nothing to do with the busyness of the company, and they do it for their own ends, and they pinch paper clips, and they say, nobody will miss it, make the phone call, pinch.
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition, meow.
You're right. You did have two mares, I'm afraid. Clement, well listened and well challenged. If the listeners are wondering what that laugh was, it was Kenneth was so overcome with surprise he actually touched Clement Freud, and the audience seemed to enjoy it. 11 seconds for Clement on the subject of fiddling, starting now.
In order to fiddle really effectively, you should try first to light Rome, which you might best do by using other people's bonfires with which to
So Clement was speaking as the whistle went, just, I think, and increased his position in second place, catching up on Derek Nimmo in the lead, and Kenneth Williams and Peter Jones are trailing somewhat in third and fourth place. Will you begin the next round, please? Peter Jones, papering the ceiling. I don't know if you've ever done it, but try and talk on the subject if you can in the game, starting now.
Well, it is something to be avoided at all costs. It's back-breaking and arm-swelling, straining, and it really does impose a tremendous...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Sorry.
Yes, he's got his head up to the ceiling and completely overcome with it all. 50 seconds are left for papering the ceiling, Derek, starting now.
The thing to start off with is a large pot of cold water paste. I don't like any of these newfangled ones that people use these days. It's not at all nice. But what I've just mentioned is absolutely splendid. Put it into a bucket, get your brush, then glue the back of the piece of paper, lift into the air, and put it into the far corner of the ceiling that you want, in fact, to paper.
Peter Jones a challenge.
No ladder yet.
It's a very low ceiling.
You can always get out of it by saying a very low ceiling. What we do on a situation like that, because we love Peter's challenges, we give him a bonus point for such a good challenge. And Derek Nimmo, we don't take the subject away from you. You keep going because it wasn't legitimate with papering the ceiling. 30 seconds starting
With
now.
my spare hand, I get hold of the ladder and drag it over. This, of course, makes the paper fall down on top of one's head, and all the hairs get into the sticky stuff.
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
I don't think
I
so.
don't think he hesitated. No, he might have got a bit
Perhaps I was
stuck.
listening to some other program.
No, I disagree. I don't think you hesitated. No, you just got the paper stuck in your hair. And there are 20 seconds for papering the ceiling, Derek, starting now.
This is the best way to have the most major row with one's wife that I know, because she will be entrusted to hold the other end while you're trying to affix it onto the aforementioned ceiling. And
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Well, he's mentioned the ceiling before.
that's in
The ceiling is in the card,
Oh, I see,
actually,
because
yes.
he said aforementioned, and I thought, well, you're not supposed to mention it again, are you?
No, he was going to say the aforementioned corner of the ceiling, you see. That's where he started before. He
Do
didn't
you
want to
know
say
what I was going to say?
yes.
You've never been clairvoyant before.
No, but I'm
What's all
absolutely
this now?
brilliant
This is
at
new
the job.
machinery you've got fixed up there.
No, no,
You're
no.
mind reading as well.
No, don't make personal remarks. It's the plate in his skull, you know. It's not acting up.
The old war wound.
You now know why, if you're listening to the programme for the first time, why I am employed as chairman, because I'm the only person who can suffer these insults and still carry on with the job.
Quite right. Very good.
Derek, it was an incorrect challenge. You have 7 seconds on papering the ceiling, starting now.
Papering the ceiling, I go along to Sanderson's to buy some of that very nice floral paper, which I then take home to the establishment with a fork of tea.
So Derek has increased his lead at the end of that round, getting extra points during the round and for speaking as the whistle went. A number of repetitions were overlooked. I mean, he used the word paper 3 or 4 times, and papering is the word on the card. But
Well, there you are.
there we are. He's out in the lead in a strong, probably impregnable position for this game. We carry on the show with Clement Freud, and the subject, Clement, is concentration. Vital in just a minute. But what can you tell us about the subject in the game, starting now?
If someone is way out in front with an almost impregnable lead, then concentration in just a minute is pretty unimportant. You can listen as much as you like and talk such rubbish as you wish. If the idea of playing is to win, then play you must not.
Kenneth Williams.
I thought it was a long pause.
There definitely was a long pause.
It was the end of a sentence and the beginning of a new paragraph.
Well, if you always talk in paragraphs, I mean,
do.
it's rather difficult for us all. There was a definite pause, Clement, and there are 40 seconds for Kenneth to talk on the subject of concentration, starting now.
The best way to do this is to free yourself of all outside interference and impedimenta, and therefore you are able to give your sole thought to the project under consideration. I always find that the best thing to do is to seclude myself, perhaps in a little
Clement Freud challenged.
Hesitation?
Yes, I think you were getting so slow. You were really you were hesitating almost between the words.
Well, I'm desperate to get some marks, you see. I'm very low on the list. And I haven't scored
And I
anything.
agree. It is a matter of
Concentration.
pride now. Yes, whether Derek Nimmo wins or not is incidental, but there is pride, as well as the incredible contribution you all make, whether you're winning or not.
And to get the approval of the chairman, you see.
Oh, Kenneth, you're going too far now. There are 13 seconds for Clement Freud to talk on concentration, starting now.
If you get a substance and boil it long enough, whether it be on gas, solid fuel, or electricity, then that will be concentrated and thick and be very much more nutritional than it would otherwise.
So, Clement Freud gained a number of points in that round, and Kenneth did as well, and we're back to Derek Nimmo to begin, and the subject is bugs. Will you tell us something about bugs? That's the subject that MS has thought of, and you have 60 seconds to talk about it if you can, Derek, starting now.
Bugs of the electronic variety are becoming increasingly prevalent these days for industrial espionage. I saw advertised a week or so ago, a suitcase that you can buy, which has on the top of it a built-in microphone, so you can hear what people, and it records it for you, are saying when you go to see your competitors, business colleagues, and so on. It all has
Peter Jones has challenged.
You can hear what your colleagues are saying without taking a suitcase fitted with an electronic.
It is transmitting the message through to control.
It was such a lovely challenge, Peter. You get a point and the subject, and you have 37 seconds to tell us about bugs, starting now.
Well, the bugs I remember are those that were in beds in theatrical digs many years ago. They used to be quite lively things, and they attacked one during the hours of darkness and left wheals and unpleasant marks, terribly irritating, and altogether...
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
A definite
Yes, definite, yes.
Yes, it was.
You mentioned what it was, and there we are. Bugs is now with you, Kenneth, and there are 19 and a half seconds left, starting now.
Well, it's often said medically you can get one of these bugs that you can pick up, they say, in very odd climates that you're not perhaps used to in the ordinary sense of your usual kind of travel, you see. Then there are bugs in the bed, as Peter Jones has pointed out, but DDT will always get rid of them.
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of D.
Yes, DDT. So Clement's got in on a good challenge, and with only 3 seconds to go on bugs, starting now.
Bugs is one of the lesser-known signs of the zodiac.
And the only thing they didn't mention was Bugs Bunny. Clement, I said that Derek was in an impregnable position, but you're interested to hear that with your agility and brilliance of the game, you're catching up on him rapidly. You're only 4 points behind. And Kenneth is not far behind. Peter's trailing a little, and Kenneth Williams begins the next round. The subject is King James I's opinion of tobacco. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
I can't remember the exact phrase he used, but he found it offensive. And, of course, that's something he shared with Clement Freud, or shared... I mean, I couldn't share with him, but I mean, that's sense...
Peter Derek Nimmo challenged.
Oh,
It was
no.
not a sort of bumbling
No,
noise. It didn't
no.
seem to say any words.
No, he kept going very well.
Repetition of...
That's
Yes,
the
that's
noise,
right,
yes.
yes. And as he hadn't really got going, it was a very difficult subject, and you're in a pregnable position, and I think the audience would like him to go on a bit longer. Do you mind if I'm a little bit heartless for once? Just for once?
My dear, you're a law unto yourself always.
Yes, but I think we all like everybody to get a chance on the
yes,
subject
I
they
do that.
start with. So, Kenneth, I think we're going to be very generous and let you continue with 53 seconds left on King James I's opinion of tobacco, starting now.
Well, he thought it was noxious and poisonous. And, of course, there are many people who maintain to this day that his judgment was a correct one and that it should be forbidden in public places because it can affect not only the person that's doing it, but those that have got to suffer the kind of nastiness, fumes, and...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of suffer.
Yes, you did say suffer before, sorry. So, Peter, you have the subject of King James I's opinion of tobacco, 29 seconds, starting now.
Well, I think it's rather sad that it's about all that anybody knows about James I, a man who lived to be 53 and a half, and as far as I know, was fairly active during his lifetime, and he just spent about 2 minutes of that period talking about the evil effects of tobacco on the human race, and that's all that can be recalled.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Repetition of all. All
Yes,
people
you
know
did
all
say
people.
that before.
I said all before.
Yes. A niggling challenge, but it's a correct one.
Yes, right, yeah.
Fair.
Fairly niggling.
Only once did I deliberately go against you because Kenneth wanted to get going on the subject, but you have it now, and there are 7.5 seconds on King James I's opinion of tobacco, starting now.
King James I's opinion of tobacco desperately upset the good people of Virginia because that was their principal export, and I think went a long way to...
Oh, sorry, Peter Jones has challenged.
Yes, it wasn't their principal export. I haven't time to go into now what their principal export was.
I think it's one of those things that I must put this to the superior judgment of our audience. Now, in the year 1603, when King James I came to the throne of England, having been, of course, James VI of Scotland, we would like you to judge on what was the principal export of Virginia in that particular year. Now, if you agree that it was not tobacco, then you cheer with Peter Jones, and if you agree that it was tobacco, you boo for Derek Nimmo, and you all do it together now. They decided it was not the principal export, Peter.
That's right.
You, Peter, you've got in with only half a second to go on the subject, starting now.
Give us a fag, will you?
We have no more time to play the game, alas, so to the end of the contest, let me give you the final score, and Peter Jones finishing on a very nice note, but unfortunately still finished in 4th place. He was a little way behind Kenneth Williams, who was not far behind Clement Freud, who never quite caught up on the one who took the lead at the beginning and kept it throughout. Our winner this week, Derek Nimmo. Well, as I'm sure you realize, we have enjoyed playing the game. I think our audience in the studio have enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as well, because we'll be back again next week, and we want you to enjoy it then as well. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin. Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Sheila Hancock and Gyles Brandreth in Just a Minute. And as the Minute Waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And this week we have two of our regulars, Peter Jones and Kenneth Williams. We welcome back, after quite a long interval, Sheila Hancock. Sheila, who always says, I don't know why I come on this ridiculous game, but always does outstandingly well whenever she does. And we have a new guest, someone who hasn't played the game before, Gyles Brandreth. The rules have remained the same. I'm going to ask our four panelists at different times if they can speak on some subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, and deviating from the subject. We will begin the show this week with Peter Jones, and the subject, Peter, is a long one. The most outstanding personality in this show. What a difficult subject to go on. You have 60 seconds starting now.
Well, I think it's a very unkind subject to give me, the most outstanding personality in this show, because I'm not going to give a name to the person I think who is, because it would be both undiplomatic and unkind. I think that it is basically a team show, and when somebody stands out, and how terribly boring this is.
Sheila Hancock is challenged.
Hesitation and not answering the question.
I thought he was being extraordinarily diplomatic.
But not answering the question.
But it isn't a question. You're asked to talk for a minute on a subject. It's not a question.
No, it wasn't a question. No, he's quite right. But, Sheila, I will grant your first challenge of hesitation. So Peter gets Sheila, you get a point for a correct challenge, and you take over the subject. There are 36 seconds. The most outstanding personality in the show starting now.
The most outstanding personality in this show is definitely Derek Nimmo, because...
Peter Jones is challenged.
Sorry, Derek Nimmo isn't in this show.
Really? Oh.
That's Gyles Brandreth.
Gyles Brandreth.
Sorry, all right.
So, Peter, that's a very good challenge. He's not in the show, so you have 29 seconds to take the subject back again, starting now.
And since he's not in the show, I can say how he fails to outstand.
Gyles Brandreth, the challenge.
Well, I want to sound a bit like Derek Nimmo now, but I fear I'm going to end up sounding more like David Jacobs. There was hesitation of a kind there.
Of a kind, but not enough, I think.
Oh, quite sufficient. It's not going to start. I've seen us greenhorns be trampled over before now on this. And I intend to start as I mean to go on.
Right, now, well, if you wait...
How many seconds do I have left?
If you intend to go on that way, do you wish to come up here?
Yes.
And take over?
Yes. Not necessarily today, but perhaps next week.
Gyles, I have the rules such as they are to try and adhere to, and I am going to, with great strength of mind, overrule your exuberant challenge. Peter, you still have the subject and got a point, of course, also for a wrong challenge, and you have... there are 25 seconds left on the subject, the most outstanding personality in the show, starting now.
If we're going by age alone, then obviously Kenneth is the most outstanding personality in the show because he has been doing it for much longer than any of the rest of us. I've been doing it second. And Sheila, I think...
Gyles Brandreth.
There's a combination of hesitation and the repetition of doing it.
Yes, but I can't give you 2 points.
I'm quite prepared to accept just 1 point.
Right.
If I'm allowed to speak now.
Yes. For a first-time guest, you've spoken more than anybody else who's ever played the game. Gyles, I will give you the word to start. That's one of the few jobs left to me when you're on the show. It is the most outstanding personality in the show, and you have 12 seconds starting now.
There is no doubt at all in my mind that the most outstanding personality in this show is the boyish figure of Nicholas Parsons, whom I have known for so long that I knew him when he was merely known as Nick Cure.
He said no twice.
As much as I'd like to give Gyles Brandreth a bonus point for those brilliant and superbly phrased remarks of his, he does get a point actually for speaking as the whistle went, and he is actually in the lead alongside Peter Jones at the end of the round. And Sheila Hancock, we're going to hear from you because you're beginning the next round, and the subject is getting the baby to sleep. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
It's something I'm really quite skilled at, because when my little ones were young, I discovered an infallible method. You have to have the skin under your hands. And...
Hesitation and obviously laughing. I mean, the whole thing is disgraceful.
I just knew that you'd interrupt. I was visualising what you said.
What on earth does it mean, the skin under your hands?
Unless you let me carry on, you won't know.
No, well, we're not terribly interested.
We'll ask you when the round is over. Kenneth, you have the subject of the skin under your hands. Oh, no, it's an even better subject for you. It's getting the baby to sleep. So, Kenneth, tell us something about that in 46 seconds, starting now.
I have been complimented on my ability in this direction on more than one occasion. And a vicar, when I was holding a baby at the font, said, "You have a curious neck. And what is the secret?" I said, "A gentle massaging at the base of the spine, which was told me many moons ago by a distinguished pediatrician in Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital."
Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yeah, I think you had got so slow.
Yes, he's just jealous, darling. He's just jealous because I've got this lovely hair.
He didn't just...
My lovely hair. That's why he's jealous. I can tell you.
I don't think you could have...
He said earlier on it's like spun gold. He said I'd like to walk through it barefoot.
It looks as though somebody has.
He's jealous.
Well,
He can't bear me being a success. He can't bear it. Look at him. He's furious because I'm successful.
Kenneth, you see, I'll tell you how successful you were. You weren't only about putting the baby to sleep, you actually put the audience to sleep. And so the hesitation, I do think you couldn't have gone slow without hesitating, so I will give...
Well, he hesitated not just between the words, but between the syllables.
So, Peter, you take over the subject of getting the baby to sleep. 10 seconds, starting now.
A few drops of good quality malt whiskey introduced into the baby's bottle is an infallible method of getting the child to sleep.
Gyles Brandreth has challenged.
This is not just deviation, it's deviant. And also quite dangerous that people should be encouraged
Here,
to...
here, imagine people listening to the family show.
Yes.
They'll all be getting the baby absolutely tight.
No, it's horrible and wrong.
Of course it is. Horrible and wrong. You couldn't have phrased it better.
He's
Horrible
not
and
deviating
wrong.
from the subject, actually, you see. That's what I have to interpret. It makes my life very difficult, and I make... Oh, you are kind. Oh, let's forget about the other four, you and I and the other. So, Peter, you keep the subject, and you have 2 seconds... No, 1 second left, starting now.
Have a good shot yourself first.
Peter Jones gained a number of points in that round, including one for speaking as the whistle went, and he's now in a very strong lead. Kenneth, your turn to begin. The subject, Camelot. Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
The actual site of Camelot is the subject of considerable contention. Those who maintain that he had the castle in what is now called Tintagel are probably, I would say, correct.
Gyles,
There was really quite a hesitation between I would say and correct. There was a kind
There
of glottal
was,
shock.
but I think it was dramatic effect on this occasion.
It was dramatic effect, that's right, you see. I was after dramatic effect, that's true. He's a very good chairman, you know. I feel for the game.
It's very difficult. You weren't going as slow as you were before, but
No.
almost, and it's very difficult to judge, and Gyles is a guest, but he's a very good guest, so I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, and telling you that you have 44 seconds to continue on Camelot, starting now.
In the recent musical Camelot, the lead was played by my old chum, Richard Burton, and I said to him, well, you've taken on a pretty pill. It's a vast part, you know, and he suggests exhausting, and I said, far from those days when we were together in the Grand at Swansea, and there he was playing Constantine. Little did I dream then that it would be Camelot.
Gyles
We're
Brandreth.
now talking about Chekhov, it appears, as opposed
No,
to Camelot.
you're quite right, Gyles. He has deviated from Camelot and
But it
gone
was
on to Richard
interesting,
Burton.
wasn't it?
So, Gyles, you have the subject of Camelot, and there are 17 seconds starting now.
There are many people who feel that Camelot is in fact a car park for dromedaries. They are incorrect in that it is a paradise place, and I once taught at a school that was known as Camelot, a school for the sons and daughters of incredibly wealthy...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of school.
Yes, you had 2 schools you taught at, Gyles. So, Peter, correct challenge. Camelot's the subject, 2.5 seconds left, starting now.
Yes, it was an interesting show in America.
So at the end of that round, Peter Jones has increased his lead, and Gyles Brandreth begins the next round. Gyles, something I think you know a great deal about, puzzles. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Those people who believe that a slight inclination of the cranium is as adequate as the spasmodic movement of one optic to an equine quadruped, utterly devoid of any visionary capacity, will appreciate the world of puzzledom, because they will understand that that phrase actually means a nod is as good as a wink to a blind horse. That is the kind of puzzle that I appreciate, a literary puzzle of a certain amount of refinement. My great-grandfather was a manufacturer of laxative pills, and he produced the first Brandreth's puzzle book in the year 1901 in order to promote the sales of these particular medicaments. The idea of them was that they made your tummy feel much more comfortable. The idea of the puzzles was to distract...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
A repetition of idea.
Yes, Peter, you're in there with only 3 seconds to go on puzzles, starting now.
Yes, well, crossword puzzles.
Sheila Hancock.
Yes, well, didn't you
Yes,
say
well,
that in this
I
round?
agree, hesitation. There's only 1 second left for you, Sheila, on puzzles, starting now.
Puzzles are...
Sheila Sheila Hancock got the point for speaking as the whistle went, and Peter Jones is still in the lead. Gyles Brandreth is following, and Sheila and Kenneth are trailing a little. Peter, it's your turn to begin. The subject is getting a tan. Can you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
What a lot of man-hours are spent uselessly, in my opinion, by people trying to get...
Kenneth Williams.
I think it's hesitation.
Yes, I'm afraid it was.
Very bad hesitation.
It was very unkind challenge.
Really.
Hardly got
Probably, I'm not
going.
known for my kindness.
So, Kenneth, you have the subject. There are 55 seconds on getting a tan starting now.
Well, the best way to do this is to lie in the direct rays of the sun and cover the skin with the appropriate lotions. Of course, they're always trying to give you this old rubbish about vinegar and oil mixed together, but the feel of it's so horrid and the smell is quite disgusting. So you're better...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
I don't think the smell of oil and vinegar can be described as disgusting. It is, after all, a vinaigrette dressing. And it's eaten by people all over the world with great relish.
Well, that is not deviating from the subject. So Kenneth keeps the subject on getting a tan. There are 35 seconds starting now.
In my youth, I got a tan if I was rude to my parents. And my father would say, you're going to be bent over my knee and you're going to get a tan.
And Sheila Hancock challenged.
You're going to get a tan. I mean,
You're going to. That's right. He repeated the phrase.
And anyway, it is obvious proof of the how appallingly badly he was treated as a child with his corporal punishment. He's ended up a warped, emotionally stunted individual, and I think he ought to be given a point.
All right, yes, I'll give it to him. Poor soul, I know.
We've gone into the realms of surrealism now, and I'm going to let Sheila Hancock have her challenge, and there are 23 seconds left. Getting a tan, Sheila, starting now.
Getting a tan was something I used to spend a great deal of time doing, and found it...
Gyles Brandreth.
It wasn't a dramatic pause. It was really hesitation.
It
the
really
mind was
was.
searching desperately for something.
Yes,
to say.
you are right.
Well, I kept going. It was searching, but I kept going.
Yeah, but you did pause in the process, which is one of the rules of the game. So, Gyles, you have the subject of getting a tan. There are 17 seconds left, starting now.
Sheila Hancock and I have something in common in that we are both totally bald from navel to Adam's apple. And consequently, when...
Deviation. Bald from where, did he say?
Navel to Adam's apple. It was perfectly clean and wholesome and proper.
And I'm ready to prove it if Sheila is.
I do.
We see how far down your mind rests, Kenneth. He was talking about the upper part that we can talk about in a family show. And so, Gyles, you have a correct challenge. I'm sorry, a point for an incorrect challenge, and you keep the subject. There are 10 seconds left. Getting a tan, starting now.
As a consequence of my untanned torso, I have recently acquired a chest wig. It is a sort of Hessian vest with horsehair sewn onto it, and I have to go with it matching underarm toupee.
Well, it's an interesting contest because Gyles Brandreth, our clever word spinner here, is leaping forward. He's now only 1 point behind our leader, who is still Peter Jones. And Sheila, your turn to begin. The subject is lines. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
There's nothing more pleasing on a Monday than to see lines of billowing washing that you've been doing ever since Saturday, which I'm sure all the ladies and gentlemen in the audience will agree with me. The other sort of lines that come to mind are those that are gradually becoming etched deeply upon my face, which give me less pleasure, particularly as I have just acquired a singularly...
Peter Jones's challenge.
Repetition of pleasure.
Yes. Yes. You talked about the lack of pleasure before, I'm afraid, Sheila. There are 37 seconds for you, Peter, to take over the subject of lines, starting now.
The lines I remember are the ones I was given at school for misbehaving, and I think it would probably have been better if I hadn't, because it put me off many of the things that I had to copy out. And I don't recall any of the good advice that I was given on those occasions, and I'm all in favour of allowing children to behave.
Gyles Brandreth.
I think a series of little hesitations.
Yes, I think so, Gyles. So you have the subject of lines, and there are 19 seconds starting now.
I believe the most difficult line ever given to a radio actor was, "This is the chair Schmidt
sat in when he was shot. This took place in a thriller on the American radio network in the 1930s. The actor concerned was unfortunately intoxicated at the time of his performance, and consequently, instead of saying what he should have said...
That strange, rather half-hearted attempt at a whistle blow was because I tried to pull the whistle out of Ian Mester's mouth as he blew it in order that Gyles Brandreth could carry on with the story, because that sounded rather a good one.
My teeth went with it.
I know. He didn't tell me about that new set before we started the series. He did go beyond, so he was certainly well within the 60 seconds and gets a point for speaking at that moment, and he's now equal in the lead alongside Peter Jones. And the next subject is My Goodness, and my goodness, it's Kenneth Williams. Your turn to begin. So would you talk on the subject in just a minute, Kenneth, starting now?
Well, my goodness is never in question. My altruism is obvious to anyone who has ever had any of the remote dealings with me that I would consider peripheral to the average kind of acquaintanceship. Now, I'm not here to do a lot of self-advertising. I'm too humble a person to indulge in that kind of thing, so I will take that aspect of the phrase which means, my goodness, which is the kind of surprise we often register when told of some untoward happening. Some sensation, it may be. You don't know. I mean, you can have... You can have... What's the matter?
A desperate man sitting next to me I felt needed to be let off the hook. And he repeated some 3 times.
He did, actually, yes. So you let him go on the second one. That was very generous of you. A guess, first time. Gyles, you have 15 seconds on My Goodness, starting now.
My kind...
Peter Jones's challenge.
This is the way they treat a shy, retiring first-time boy. It's monstrous.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that, but I do agree with the fact that it's your first time on the show, and we should be a little bit more generous, so we won't charge any points on that, and tell you, Gyles, to continue with the subject of My Goodness, and 14 seconds starting now.
My goodness springs from the belief that it is a better time to be alive now than it has been in the whole history of the world. I know that for Peter Jones, 1959 was a very good year, and we do occasionally get days.
Well, our shy, retiring, modest, new player of the game, Gyles Brandreth, is now in the lead. He's 2 points ahead of Peter Jones. And, Gyles, it's your turn to begin. The subject is hallucinations. Marvellous subject for this particular game, as frequently it occurs here. But would you talk on the subject, if you can, in 60 seconds, starting now?
For many years I have suffered from the hallucination that I was taking part in Just a Minute and curiously moving into the lead against all expectations. I was once put on a very mild drug called a Cenopod, and as a result of this, I gained a terrible series of hallucinations, during which I believed I was firstly noddy.
I'm sorry, a deviation, because we know Cenopods are not a drug. I mean, they're a laxative, aren't they?
I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt on that one and tell you that you have 40 seconds on hallucinations starting now.
This definitely happened to me on holiday. I was given what I believe to be a Mickey Thin. That's what I think. And in the middle of the afternoon, I felt I was floating. And this awful sort of sense of colours going right with my eyes. I thought, oh, where am I? Oh, my goodness. I had this all Toscanini in Malaga.
Deviation, my goodness, was the last subject.
All right, Gyles, a bonus point for a clever challenge.
Are you sure he isn't Derek Nimmo?
Derek's clever enough to send somebody along disguised, disguise himself as Gyles Brandreth. I don't know, I'm getting very involved here. But, Kenneth, you get a point for a wrong challenge. You keep the subject, and you have 23 seconds left, starting now.
It seems now to be established that Joan of Arc definitely had hallucinations, because she said that she was addressed by the Archangel Gabriel and St. Michael, and they come to her in this dream and told her to chuck out the English from France, which was the most silly thing they could have done, because we were the people that made France what it is.
Sheila Hancock challenge.
Well, he's gone off the subject of hallucinations. He's talking about Joan of Arc, but also I think a lot of people would question his theory that they were hallucinations.
But that's got nothing to do with Just a Minute, I'm afraid.
Deviation.
No, yeah, your first deviation was correct. Yes, he'd got off the subject of hallucinations onto Joan of Arc and chucking the English out and that area of history.
Oh, God, I don't want this subject. I've got nothing to
Well,
say.
you were interrupting. You did the interrupting, so now you've got to bear
How
it.
long have I got to talk on
Only
it?
4 seconds.
Right.
4 seconds, Sheila, on hallucinations starting now.
I saw this great big bear leaping around in Richmond Park.
What is the score? Oh, Gyles Brandreth is still in the lead, but Peter Jones is not far behind. Right, Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject is sentimentalism. There are 60 seconds to talk on that subject, starting now.
Well, there does seem to be more of it about than ever. I notice in these greeting card shops the most sickly sentimental postcards are available. And in the columns of provincial newspapers, they have these personal advertisements, which seem...
Kenneth Williams, Charles. Yes, I'm afraid so. And so, Kenneth, you have the subject of sentimentalism, and there are 44 seconds left, starting now.
It occurs most obviously in those lines, and as I cannot see your face and cannot take you by the hand, I send these words through time and space to greet you. You will understand. And there is a charm in sentimentality which none of us should despise. Who are we to run down someone's attempt, even though it's a little halting, might be pathetic? They are trying to express something.
Sheila Hancock.
Trying. Repetition of trying.
Did I say that? Oh, how trying.
I wouldn't swear to it.
I don't think he mentioned the... No, I don't hear him say trying. No, I think you were trying a bit hard there.
You'll hear when the recording goes out that he probably did, but I wouldn't swear to it.
Well, we're giving the benefit of the doubt, and there are 11 seconds on sentimentalism, Kenneth, starting now.
I'm charmingly evinced in the Victorian ballads. Darling, I am growing older. Silver threads among
Peter
the
Jones,
gold.
Charles.
That's certainly the first true thing he's said all night.
But, Peter, he wasn't addressing you. Peter, we give you a bonus for a lovely challenge. Kenneth won for being interrupted, and he keeps the subject, and there are 4.5 seconds. Sentimentalism, Kenneth, starting now.
Pluck the harp gently, my pretty Louise, was sung by sentimental Victorians.
Well, Kenneth Williams kept going on sentimentalism magnificently until the
go on, I've got in the lead.
You've got a point for speaking when the
Yes,
whistle
go on.
went, and you have quite a lot of points.
Yes?
But you're still in third place. And his time has come to give you the final score. Sheila Hancock, who, when she was with us some weeks back, triumphed magnificently, she finished up just behind Kenneth Williams because he had that last great flourish on sentimentalism. Peter Jones finished in second place, and the winner this week by 3 points is the first-time player of the game. A great performance, great value to the show, Gyles Brandreth. Well, as I'm sure you realize, we have enjoyed playing the game. I think our audience in the studio have enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it as well, because we'll be back again next week, and we want you to enjoy it then as well. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Derek Nimmo, and Victoria Wood in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And once again, we have three of our regular players of the game, and we're delighted to welcome that lovely, delightful and amusing actress as our guest this week for the very first time, Victoria Wood. And it does require courage to come on and play against these three fellows. And once again, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And we will begin the show this week. And unfortunately, Derek's lost his voice again, but I've no doubt that he will be heard all right because he never fails. And he's going to begin the show with the most incredible thing I know. There are 60 seconds, as usual, Derek, and you start now.
The most incredible thing I know was revealed onto me quite recently on a trip from Singapore into Johor Bahru. I had crossed the causeway and turned right and visited this chap's house. Now, the interesting thing about it was, although the temperature was 95 degrees outside, inside, the air conditioning was going at full blast. It was totally freezing. One had never felt such extreme chill outside the northern part of Scotland or some such place. And I asked the fellow why. He said, well, I must keep standards.
Peter Jones has challenged you.
Repetition of fellow.
Yes. That is right, Peter. So you have a correct challenge for which you get a point, and you take over the subject. The subject is the most incredible thing I know. There are 29 seconds left, starting now.
The most incredible thing I know I read in The Guardian only a few weeks ago. Apparently, if a person could speak uninterruptedly for as long as a year, he still wouldn't use as much energy as it takes to boil an egg. Now, that does seem to me the most remarkable piece of information, and it was quoted from the Science Monthly, I think it was. And if one could imagine...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
His imagination ran out.
Yes, I agree. So there's a pause, and Derek, you have the subject back with a point for a correct challenge, and there are 3 seconds left, starting now.
And he had a great big roaring fire going, which was the most incredible thing that I
Well, when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was, of course, Derek Nimmo, and he has 2 points at the end of that round. And Peter Jones, who's in second place, will begin the next round, and the subject is, Peter, those who are listening on their car radios. Can you talk on that subject starting now?
Well, those who are listening on their car radios are not necessarily listening to this program. I think it would be conceited to assume that even a majority were. But may I suggest to those who are listening to this particular show that they turn off the main road or motorway into a by-lane and listen uninterrupted by those ghastly motorcycles that are not fitted with suppressors and spoil a great deal of pleasure for people who are enjoying the music, the humour, the wit, and the beautiful use of the English language which is demonstrated on Just a Minute and not many other shows. Now, I'm aware that I have repeated the word show, so I feel
Peter, you shouldn't have drawn their attention to it.
No, I thought they'd gone to sleep.
No, actually, we were enjoying it, and we were in such complete sympathy, we wanted to continue, I'm sure.
I see, yes.
But
right,
Derek did challenge. Derek, yes.
Well,
yes, as he said. Right, Derek, 15 seconds on those who are listening on their car radios starting now.
Well, those people who are listening on their car radios to Just a Minute at this moment, I suggest that they wind down the windows and tap on passing cars and suggest that they flick over the channel, because then we might get one of these big audiences that Nicholas Parsons likes to boast about occasionally. But if
Victoria Wood is challenged.
Well, I suppose a bit of
hesitation.
Blurring.
Definitely, yes, the
right.
is a hesitation,
Well,
Victoria.
Victoria.
Yes, and you have played the game that Clement Freud regularly plays and the others try to, and that is getting in just before the whistle goes. You have literally half a second to talk on those who are listening on their car radios, starting now. Victoria Wood speaking on the subject, and yet she is in second place with 2 points at the present moment.
Well, I would like to congratulate Victoria Wood on her debut, because her speech, unlike many of the others, didn't drag at all. I thought it was a splendid start.
Right. Kenneth, we're going to hear from you now. Oh, yes, what a lovely subject for you, going off the deep end. Will you tell us something about that subject in the game starting now?
Most of the people that go off at the deep end do so because of provocation, and that's what I've been subjected to on more than one occasion doing this game, coming all the way from Great Portland Street at considerable inconvenience because my feet are not all...
Victoria Wood has challenged.
Deviation.
Why, dear?
Well, his feet are nothing to do with it, are they?
But he was, his feet have got nothing to do with going off, well, you never know, going off the deep end, but I don't think he deviated from the subject sufficiently. He was demonstrating that it is very difficult for him, and I think she's a guess. I think I should give it to her, don't you? Yes, Victoria, give you the benefit of the doubt. There are 40 seconds for you to go on the subject of going off the deep end, starting now.
Well, I go off the deep end when I go swimming at the Morecambe and Lancaster Recreation Area Centre pool deep end, and what I do is I go in my navy costume, which has a halter neck, and it's sort of gathered under the bust, and it sort of goes up at the back. It's very attractive. So,
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
Who sort of?
Yes, isn't it terrible? Oh, rotten, isn't it? It is difficult, isn't it?
That's what I felt when I was pulled up in the middle of discussing my feet.
I know. And you are very sporting. For once, you never berated me for that. So, Kenneth, you have the subject back again, and there are 24 seconds for going off the deep end, starting now.
I did it in a play once and shot into the wings and said, "How dare you not give me that cue on time, you great fool," and shoved the other actor into what appeared to be a pageant lamp, and it fell on him and cut him considerably. And the producer came to my dressing room and said, "This boy is in great pain as a direct result of your..."
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, he's talking about the results of going off the deep end, not actually going off the deep end, you see. He's rambling on about his feet and about this other actor and everything. And Great Portland Street. He's giving us so much extraneous information.
But on this occasion, he really had got onto the subject of the actor and his injuries and not the actually going off the deep end. So I agree with you, Peter. You have 4 seconds for the subject, starting now.
Hold your nose and jump in when you first ascertain that the temperature of the water...
At the end of that round, we have an interesting situation. Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones, and Victoria Wood are all equal with 3 points, and Kenneth Williams is trailing with 1, but not far behind. Victoria, your turn to begin. The subject is my plums. I can see the relationship in Mesther's mind, but you take it in whichever way you like in the game, starting now. Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Stop, I thought there was.
I know,
I
but
thought there would
she
be a noise to tell me when to start.
Yes, I am the
just
noise.
got here. I mean, I can't be expected to know whether you're supposed to start or not. So I thought there'd be a noise.
If you'd been on time, we wouldn't have had this problem.
That is a rather snide reference. I must
either.
explain to the listeners, that's a snide reference, the fact that Victoria was held up on one of our great British railway trains, which was about 7 hours late. And how late was it, actually?
2.5.
2.5 hours late. And the fact that you got here at all is marvellous, and I think you look wonderful under the stress of the conditions that must have existed.
Yeah, well, stop all that flannel and let's get on. Flannel in it.
So, Victoria, we don't penalise you for that.
No.
The subject is my plums. Victoria Wood is going to talk, if she can.
Okay.
When I say now, now!
Oh, my plums are under the sink in my kitchen, which has got red and white wallpaper, and they're jammed behind the waste pipe, and they're in yellow and green tins, and every so often I'll take out a tin and I'll open it. I'll put it in my favourite bowl, which has got red and blue stripes around, and it's white china.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Revolution of red.
You had red and blue
There were
wallpaper.
different shades of red, actually.
It's a very good reply, Victoria, but I'm afraid if you do repeat the words... He's mean, actually.
He is, isn't he? I can see that from here.
I really am mean. I
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I mean, Kenneth complains about coming all the way from Great Portland Street, but she's come all the way from Morecambe.
Right, but Kenneth the Cult.
Exactly. Thank you, Derek. I'm glad that that's been made, apparently, yes. I mean, there's too little of it. I mean, people don't realise I'm a cult figure. I am an enormous cult.
Yes, a cult in your own time.
People have said you're one of the biggest cults around here. Thank you, Derek.
And only you would dare say that.
Thank you.
Derek Nimmo, you have the subject of my plums. There are 47 seconds starting now.
Well, my plums grow in my garden in Northamptonshire, and very beautiful they are. Victoria plums, matter of fact, and I like them a great deal. And when it comes to the season of the harvest, I take a bowl of them along to the vicar, and he always puts them right in front of the altar so that everyone within our little community can rejoice at the sight of these wonderful purple plums that have given so much joy and happiness to everyone in that part of the fair country.
Hesitation. He couldn't quite remember where he lived.
Let's explain for those
Curious
who don't know the
religious
game.
ceremony, this, putting the plums on the altar and... I must say. Is it some kind of cult that you have?
Well, he's a cult figure up
He
there.
must be, yes. Very dark one, I should think, too.
He's known as the biggest cult in Northamptonshire, actually, but... Peter, you have a correct challenge, and you have the subject of my plums, and there are 16 seconds starting now.
My plums are those small damson type that grow best in Shropshire and perhaps some parts of northern Worcestershire, and they make the most wonderful cheese if you boil them with a certain amount of sugar for a very long time, and then leave them preferably for a number of years.
Peter Jones was speaking as the whistle went, gained that all-important extra point, and he has taken the lead at the end of that round, one ahead of Derek Nimmo, and Derek begins the next round. Derek, the subject is an attack of the hiccups. That's what you have to talk about starting now.
That is a very annoying thing when you get an attack of the hiccups. I think the best thing to do, if it's a chum that's been afflicted, is to go along and bang him very hard on the back. And it's quite surprising how quickly it seems to go. Other ways of doing it, of course, are drinking out of a glass on the wrong side, which is a bit messy, because it can dribble down your pants and get awfully damp and nasty altogether. I don't care for that method. But one of the other ways I think of getting rid of an attack of the hiccups is to stand on your head, upside down, with your shoes.
Peter Jones is challenged.
Can't stand any other way. You're on your head, you're upside down. Repetition, deviation, boring repetition.
Actually, it was a description of what he was doing. But, Peter, we loved your challenge. We're going to give you a bonus point for that. But we leave the
I didn't like his challenge.
No, neither did I.
But you still get a point, Derek, for an incorrect challenge.
I don't care. I didn't like his challenge.
No, I quite agree.
Well, you're entitled to your opinion. And,
He's a cult with his plums on the altar. I think we should give him proper respect.
He's still got the subject and a point and 30 seconds on an attack of the hiccups starting now.
The most incredible thing I know is when you get an attack of the hiccups from eating plums, because sometimes it does lead to constipation. And therefore...
Victoria has challenged.
I'm challenging on medical grounds.
Yes, I don't think
Plums
it would lead to
can
constipation.
never lead to constipation,
No,
as I know.
Quite the reverse, I would have thought. So, Victoria, very good challenge, and you have 22 seconds for the subject of an attack of the hiccups, and you start now.
The thing to do is when you get hiccups is, and I'm just pausing a minute to give you boys a chance to butt in and give me a really bad time. No, I've remembered what I'm going to say now. The thing to do is you can get hiccups is to get
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Repetition of the thing to do.
Yes, but she was giving you the chance to butt in, which you didn't do before, and as you did it then...
That's the thing to do.
I think that was absolutely wrong.
I didn't want to butt in.
She's come all the way from Morecambe.
Oh, all right.
And the train was late. And she was playing the game in a very unusual way. It was quite... Carry on, Victoria. You have another point for that. There are 12 seconds on an attack of the hiccups starting now.
The best method to cure a person who's got hiccups is to stand them in the middle of the room and all stare at them, and they get so embarrassed they forget they've got hiccups and they stop hiccuping. Either that or they get really obsessed with attention and they turn into a career in show business. Well, I don't know which you think is better.
I think that Victoria Wood is bringing a new dimension to the game, speaking so fast that nobody can make out what on earth you're talking about. And if you do that with tremendous aplomb, as she did, well, then you can keep... All right. Keep going to the whistle wind, you get an extra point, and you can go into the lead alongside Peter Jones, which is exactly what she's done. Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. This is a subject here that Ian Mester's thought of, which we thought you might have something to say, and it's called Being Photographed Through a Gauze. So if you can tell us something on that subject, starting now.
Being photographed through a gauze was a practice used in early Hollywood films whereby the subject was made to look infinitely more lovely because the lines, so to speak, were taken out of the visage and therefore the appearance was flattered, to say the least. Now, I heard about Merle Oberon, who was always done through this gauze, and I said, when I was in Pinewood, I'd like to be photographed through a gauze. I'm sure I'm allowed to say, because it's in the subject, you see. And they said, you'll be lucky if you're done through a blanket, mate. The makeup people had said earlier on, you're more like a paper-hanging job, which was not... I think we all agree that with a regular application of the witch hazel cream, you can improve the skin texture enormously. Now, my skin is as smooth as a baby's...
Peter Jones's challenge.
Repetition of skin.
Yeah, what a pity. We were just in... Really, you did repeat the skin.
You think it's a pity that I challenged?
Yes, because I was enjoying it.
Well, I'm terribly sorry. It's a curious place to come for your enjoyment. I realize you've got peculiar tastes, but there you are.
I know, it's such a serious program.
You wouldn't be accepting money for it, of course.
No,
I wouldn't. Otherwise, you're cheating
He is
somebody.
accepting money for, you great fool, and it's a sight more than you're getting, I can tell you that much for nothing.
No, I always thought that was unfair that he got more than us.
I know, I think it's disgraceful.
It
Not
wouldn't-
especially about his job that he should get more money. I was appalled when I heard I'm a cult figure.
Well,
I'm a cult.
It still needn't be very much if he's getting more than I'm getting. I can tell you, I'm not jealous.
I can tell you, probably, if that is true, it's only because I have to concentrate throughout the program. You can just concentrate when you want to. Peter Jones.
Yes.
I agree with your challenge. He did repeat the word skin 3 times, and you have 8 seconds on being photographed through a gauze starting now.
Well, one of the difficulties about being photographed...
Kenneth Williams, a
He
challenge.
said one of the difficulties, there's not one difficulty with him, there's hundreds.
I was going to go through them one at a time. What's the matter with that?
Nothing wrong with it at all, Peter. You have another point and 5 seconds on the subject starting now.
Well, the 905th most difficult thing about being photographed through a gauze is that it... You never know.
Peter, you have increased your lead at the end of the round, getting points during it and 1 for speaking as the whistle went. And Victoria Wood is still in second place, and she also begins the next round. And the subject is choosing a frock to suit me. Will you tell us something about that subject in the game, starting now?
Choosing a frock to suit me is a very long, drawn-out process. I think it has taken up to now 20 years, and I still haven't found one. But I don't mind, because I'm carrying on wearing trousers and jumpers and jeans and swimming costumes like I was telling you about before. So I don't really mind too much that I can't really find a dress. And I said really twice, and nobody seems to be listening, so I think I'll just carry on.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
I just thought I'd help her out again. And
Thank
read
you.
her twice and dressed twice, she said as
I
well.
didn't. I said frock once
She
and
said
dress
frock and
once.
then she said dress.
I said really twice, actually, if you want to be
No, I'm
absolutely
sorry.
accurate.
I should have challenged because I did hear it, but I wasn't giving it my attention. I still can't get over this business about you getting more money than we're getting. Baffling.
Peter, I will stand you a drink afterwards, and that's just about the amount of money it
There's
costs.
no need to flaunt it.
It's the first time in 15 years, I can tell you.
Victoria, as you drew Derek's attention to your slip up there,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about your clothes, by the way.
No,
I'm talking
don't
about-
drag it out. Come on, get it out. Goes on and on, doesn't he?
It was quite wrong that he should have challenged you, so you keep the subject, and you have 40 seconds on choosing a frock to suit me, starting now.
I think if I had to choose...
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
No, of course not.
Yes, everyone agreed it was hesitation.
No, they don't.
She, Victoria.
Actually, just a bit slow after 2.5 hours on
Yeah.
the train.
Yeah, that's right. You don't come all the way from Morecambe to be challenged for hesitation by Kenneth Williams.
No.
So only 3/4 of a second went by. So you have 39.25 seconds on choosing a frock to suit me, Victoria, starting now.
What I would do is, if I have to choose a frock to suit me, I will go to the shop that does the biggest sizes in the whole world, because it's rather difficult for me to get a frock that will fit me because of being 16 on the top and 14 on the bottom, which means I really have to have a 2-piece suit, actually, if I'm going to get something that will actually fit.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of suit.
No, in 2 different senses, suit to suit and suit in costume sense.
She's quite right, you know, Derek.
Doesn't matter in what sense the word's the same, and Derek's right, it was repeated, you great fool. Use it.
She's not just a pretty face, she's a very able player of the game. She's doing marvelously.
It's a new rule, is it?
What's that?
Another new rule.
No, it's a new guest. All the way from Morecambe. And I love the people who come from Morecambe. Right, carry on, Victoria. 25 seconds, choosing a frock to suit me, starting now.
I think what would suit me best would be a very long one that covered my face.
Derek
as
Nimmo,
well.
Charlie. Yes, that's right. I give it to you that time, Derek.
But it's in the title. Your messenger wrote me a letter. He said you can say it if it's in the title.
Yes, you can. So you slipped up again.
Oh.
It's in the title.
Oh, that's it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm
Choosing
very
a prop
sorry.
to suit me. Suit the word suit. You can use it.
Yes, all right. I've made an absolute mess of it.
Victoria, you're equal in the lead now with Peter Jones. It's incredible. You have 23 seconds on choosing a frock to suit me, starting now.
If I had to pick a garment to flatter my figure, I think I would go to a shop in Regent Street or Oxford Street.
Peter Jones, the chance.
She has mentioned shop before.
Yes, and street. So, Peter, you have the subject now, and I'd love to hear what you're going to tell us in 16 seconds on choosing a frock to suit me, starting now.
Well, I did have this experience once when I was playing a pantomime dame, and I had to find not one, but several. And it wasn't at all easy, because I found I was looking rather like my aunt. And that would have been embarrassing had she been alive. And I was actually...
So Peter Jones was speaking as the whistle went, gained another point, and he's still in the lead, just ahead of Victoria Wood. Kenneth Williams and Derek Nimmo are both trailing a little in third and fourth place, respectively. And Derek, your turn to begin. The subject is tips. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
What I was really sad about was when the 10-shilling note went out of operation, because there was something awfully nice about handing a dorm a 10... Oh, yes, never mind, tip. But never mind. It doesn't matter. We've already established if your attention is drawn to it, because...
Victoria Wood has challenged you.
All right, yes, I have.
She repeated the word 10.
He certainly did.
Yes.
I spotted it myself.
Very quick the way you picked that up, Victoria.
Yes, I was in like a flash.
Right. Victoria, repetition, you have the subject. There are 47 seconds on tips, starting now.
The bother about tips is that you're never quite sure who you're supposed to give them to. I think the rule's quite clear on taxis. I think if you don't give one to a taximan, you're in big trouble, and I tend to...
Kenneth.
Give, try. Yes, there's no question about the driver being the person to tip if you're in a taxi. I think that's quite clear.
Kenneth, you have the subject of tips, and there are 37 seconds, starting now.
Those steel tips some people have on their shoes really give me the willies. I can't stand that awful click noise that goes on the whole time. And the tips on fags are very me, because you don't get all those bits of the tobacco sticking to your lips, which can be so very annoying. The other tip, which I often think of with a certain amount of amusement, is the one that's given you by the would-be know-all who says, here's a good tip for you.
Victoria.
Repetition of ear. Ear's a good tip.
Ear.
Ah, but like you used the word suit in two different senses. One was an ear hole and the other was here.
I think that was well listened. So, Victoria, 2 ears, and you have the subject, and you have 3.5 seconds on tips, starting now.
The trouble about...
And Derek Nimmo.
It was a real hesitation.
I'm
I think
afraid
that was
so,
a real
yeah. She
hesitation.
just doesn't come in. I think she's a bit of an invalid. I don't think really is.
She's suffering from train lag.
Yeah, so you never stop reminding us.
Well, if she is, she's in the right group, isn't she?
Derek, you have another point, and you have 2 seconds on tips, starting now.
I know, retired general has to go round tips and start his time.
Well, Derek Nimmo got the point for the speaking as the whistle went at the end of the round, and we have come, alas, to the end of the contest. We have enjoyed this. We hope you have. Have you enjoyed it? Do you want to stay on and do another recording? Yeah, you're not very keen, are you? I'm glad we're not doing another one. Let me give you the final score. Kenneth Williams, giving his usual good value to the programme, finished in 4th place. Who has been known on occasions to have a runaway win, finished in 3rd place. And In second place... I've just seen something. In first place, we have joint winners. Not only our guest, all the way from Morecambe, Victoria Wood, alongside one of our regulars, Peter Jones, our joint winners. You have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and we'll want to tune in again same time next week when once again we take to the air and we play this ridiculous, delightful and almost impossible game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Derek Nimmo and Graham Garden in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And this week we have three of our regulars, Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo and... yeah, someone's buzzed. Clement Freud, yes.
Hesitation, though.
And we welcome back Graham Garden. Once again, I'm going to ask our four contestants to speak if they can on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And we'll begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, the subject is what makes me excited. As you regularly get excited in the programme, I'm sure you can tell us something on the subject. 60 seconds, starting now.
It is the prospect of watching something where there is a battle of wits involved, or even a kind of intellectual exercise with a degree of abrasive criticism, where I feel the entire mental faculty, so to speak, is engaged, and immediately it's as though all the hackles were rising and the adrenaline is flowing at twice the speed, again and against it. Of course,
Derek Nimmo challenge.
He's telling me again, didn't he? I mean, I've lost the subject.
No, you haven't.
Oh, well, where on earth?
He fell into it, as you say. You get a point for a correct challenge and you keep the subject.
Right. Sure,
and there are 28 seconds on what makes me excited.
What's the subject?
What makes me excited starting now?
It was always the London Palladium where I actually saw Jack Benny appear. It was a marvel.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Repetition of it was.
It was.
Oh, that's a small thing. It
I
was.
know, but you did
make
a great point of saying
I
it
think
was.
it's most ungallant to treat someone like myself in this cavalier fashion. I mean, after all, I'm not just anybody, I'm a cult figure.
Kenny, you said that many weeks ago.
I don't care.
Derek Nimmo, you have a correct challenge, so you take over the subject of what makes me excited. There are 21 seconds left, starting now.
What makes me excited is sitting in front of a great big cult like Kenneth Williams, expound his curious philosophy about the world, and as I look at him, I think, goodness me, if only I were like him. An excitement runs through my veins. I sometimes come out in a hot flush when I see him sitting in front of me, and I want to go towards him.
Ian Messiter blows his whistle. It tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was Derek Nimmo, and who was telling us that he'd like to be like Kenneth Williams, and nobody challenged him for that idea. Derek, will you begin the next round? The subject is housebreaking. housebreaking. I don't know whether you've experience of it, but if you could talk about the subject in the game starting now.
Well, I've never actually done any housebreaking, I must confess, but I have been broken into, not personally, you understand, but my house. And I didn't really care for it awfully. It happened about a year ago. And I was away at the time, and the fellow tried to get in with a jemmy and then some bit of plastic and a great big hammer and things, but eventually, rather curiously, he took a whole glass pane out of a window and just stepped inside, over all the burglar alarms and everything, and made off with the family silver. Not much there was of it, really, but never mind, he took it away with him, some picture books.
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
Away twice.
Yes, it was, away, yes. So, Kenneth, a correct challenge. 31 seconds on housebreaking, starting now.
I think it's absolutely disgusting, and I would like to see the stocks returned and have them shoved in such an appalling device as a punishment. Housebreaking is against the law, and when it occurred to me, I lost 2 very nice pairs of shoes, and they were specially I was supposed to be in, and they got 2 pairs in case I fell in.
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
4 pairs.
I said a pair, and then I said pairs. 2 pairs. You great fool!
Well, I must say, it sounded to me very much like from where I'm sitting, 2 pairs.
I said lost a pair first.
Did
And
you?
then I said 2
nice
pairs,
pairs.
especially.
No,
Well, Clement Freud is sitting next to you, and he can hear best because he's closest when you're speaking as quietly as that. We will, and as your friend Clement is supporting you, we will give you the benefit of the doubt and tell you that you have 4 seconds on housebreaking, starting now.
The police invited me round to the station, and they said we feel deeply.
Was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and after all the talking he's done, you won't be surprised to hear that he's definitely in the lead at the end of that round. Derek Nimmo is following. Graham Garden and Clement Freud have yet to speak, I think.
Hello.
Hello, Clement.
Clement, will you begin the next round, please? The subject is settling down. Would you... Kenneth definitely needs to settle down after the excitement that he's created. But there are 60 seconds on that subject, Clement, starting now.
There are really very few other ways to settle than down. Though sideways, I suppose you could make out a lukewarm case for, and up is all right if you like that sort of thing. On Thanksgiving Day last year, or the year before if you're listening to a repeat,
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Well, we had 2 years.
Yes, last year and the year before, if you're listening to a repeat. The word year, gosh, the way he looks as if, how dare we give it against it? Derek, you have 41 seconds on settling down, starting now.
Oh, the horror of coming back to school after the long holiday and having to settle down to the classroom routine once more.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation is years since he went back to school.
It may be years, but he still wasn't deviating from the subject. He could have been talking about one of his children or his grandchildren. There are 35 seconds, Derek, on settling down, starting now.
Actually, I haven't done one of these programs for some little time, and I do think that...
Kenneth Williams.
That is painfully obvious.
Derek, you have a wrong challenge, so you have a point for that. It shows you how fair and generous I am. You keep the subject. You have 31 seconds to continue on settling down, starting now.
It's terribly difficult to settle down, isn't it, when there's been a tremendous outbreak, a surge of enthusiasm in this program, when you've heard Kenneth Williams singing the songs of the music hall, when you've heard Parsons...
I don't think I dare, actually.
do say
a couple
something.
of herds.
Yes,
Absolutely, you're so clever.
Graham, he was just about to say something very derogatory about me, so I'm very pleased you challenged. There are 21 seconds for you to talk on settling down, starting now.
Settling down in an armchair is something I've always found extremely difficult, because the arms of the particular instrument that you're trying to settle down in are always...
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
Well, he's talking about an armchair, and then he says an instrument, and by no means can we call
No,
that...
I agree. I don't think a chair can be called an instrument.
Good gracious me.
It'd be more like a dentist.
Well, yes, sure. Very good. You're very astute, Richard.
It's a musical.
Oh, dear, what you suffer becoming into this game. But thank you, Kenneth. Nice thought. 11 seconds for you on settling down, starting now.
I settled down the other night with some fizzy salts, which I can't name because of the corporation's ruling upon that subject, but the result was an explosion.
That round, Kenneth Williams gained an extra point, of course, as speaking as the whistle went, and he's keeping his lead, but he's only now 1 point ahead of Derek Nimmo. We now come to Graham Garden to begin. Moving from the subject of settling down, we now move to the subject of settling up. There are 60 seconds starting now.
Although you can settle down in the home counties or Australia, Canada, or any number of other such places, in the mountainous...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Deviation, there are no such places as Australia. They're all autonomous, special, cherished.
I think you could assume there were other places.
There's nothing like Australia. That's the only place where you can find the marsupial. It's ludicrous to say such places. I agree with Clement. He's quite right. Don't you agree? Don't you agree? Yes, they all
6
agree.
people agree, the rest disagree. Graham Garden, you still have the subject. There are 50 seconds on settling up, starting now.
In the vertical...
Hesitation.
No. You have 49 seconds on settling up, Graham, starting now.
Switzerland is the only place in the world where you have to settle up. That is the definition of hesitation.
Yes, got so high, he hesitated, and Derek has the subject, and there are 43 seconds settling up, Derek, starting now.
So this enormous great fellow came up to me and said, look, are you going to settle up? And I said, well, I said, okay, oh, fine, I'm sorry. How much is it? He said, 50 quid. I said, 50 pound notes? He said, yes. Well, I said, all right, okay, fine, all right.
Kenneth Williams, a chance.
3, I said.
Yes, and all right. Right, 30 seconds are left for the subject of settling up. It's with you, starting now.
It's a loathsome thing to have to do, and it's usually demanded in a sort of buff-coloured envelope, which I find peculiarly offensive. And I always endeavour to get the wretched things out of the way as quickly as is humanly possible, with the help of a very charming man.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
I just don't think Kenneth could do anything. Well, he said it was as quick as humanly possible. I think he's sort of... I suggest he's not entirely human. There's a sort of pixie-like quality which...
I think you're struggling on a very devious challenge, Derek, and I disagree. And Kenneth keeps the subject 4.5 seconds on settling up, Derek. Kenneth, starting now.
The best way to do it is a little bit put back.
Kenneth has increased his lead at the end of that round. And Derek Nimmo's in second place. Graham Garden is trailing a little with Clement Freud. And Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. The subject now is the hole in Noah's Ark. Can you tell us something about that subject in the game, starting now?
The title of this subject is somewhat misleading, since there was more than one hole. The holes in question could have been eyes, and certainly mouths out of which came cries.
Graham Garden challenged.
Repetition of mouths.
Oh, yes, that's very good.
Yes.
Yes.
52 seconds are left for you,
You're not
Graham,
just
to
a pretty
talk on the
face.
subject of the hole in Noah's Ark.
I started yet.
No, you haven't started. Derek challenged, but Kenneth got a laugh. I don't know what he said, so I can't...
He said that you weren't just a pretty face.
No, you just said that. Graham, 52 seconds. The hole in Noah's Ark, starting now.
It is quite astounding the amount of damage that a pair of termites can do. And of course, on Noah's Ark, there were a couple of...
Yes, Kenneth.
No, I didn't challenge. Not my bill.
Your light came on.
Well, I saw all a mix-up with the electrics. I saw Derek.
So,
I saw Derek press. I don't know what he was up with.
well, your light came on. Do you want to test
It's
it?
with your electrics. It's your electrics are wrong. Your wiring.
If you want to know at home what this means,
your
I
AC.
have
I don't know
a
if you don't know
series
whether
of
your
lights
AC
in
or
front of me, and
DC.
that's how I can tell who presses their buzzer. Then it was Derek Nimmo. In other words, you don't want to challenge.
I can't remember it. It must have been an impulse. It must have been an impulse, you see. I've got a lot of impulses, because I'm a cult figure, you see. I actually have these impulses.
Oh, for goodness sake, don't let's go into that. So, your light came on. Are you accepting the challenge or not?
No, I never challenged
Right.
anyone. No, I would never do that. As a cult figure, I would regard that as...
So then Graham Garden keeps the subject.
Oh, most
with a point
certainly.
for a
Very
incorrect
worthy,
challenge,
very worthy.
which is the only right decision. And there are 43 seconds for you to continue, Graham, on the hole in Noah's Ark, starting now.
The watertight bottom of Noah's Ark was riddled with holes and tunnels and tiny passages caused by these nibbling insects.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, if it was riddled with holes, it wouldn't be watertight.
No, I quite agree.
it's like
none of the
a bit of
holes
false
actually
bottom.
passed from the outside to the inside. They were going along.
Oh,
I was going to explain all that.
Oh, I see.
As he's our guest, we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and let him continue for 33 seconds on the hole in Noah's Ark, starting now.
The elephants were taking their morning constitutional along a particularly weak part of the boards which were keeping the water from pouring into Noah's Ark. But as I have just...
Kenneth Williams challenge.
We've gone an awful long time and we haven't heard anything about the hole, and that is the subject, the hole in Noah's Ark.
Yes, and he was on
so
about
I
the
think
elephants.
It's deviation.
Yes, he was on about the elephants in the Ark,
preparing
and not
the way
hole.
for it.
No, we waited quite a
no,
long
I mean,
while.
you know, the poor
Kenneth,
fellow.
you have the subject. There are 20 seconds on the hole in Noah's Ark, starting
The
now.
hole in Noah's Ark were an incredible hole, because their wholeness, we could say, was the integral, exceptional content of all the things that stocked the world and gave us food and plumage and eggs and kinds of lovely, you know, I know one challenge. They didn't want the subject.
Well, you've really excelling yourself this week, Kenneth. You not only got the lead quite early, you kept it. You're way out there in front. And Derek Nimmo and Graham Garden are trailing a little, and Clement Freud behind them. And Derek, your turn to begin. The subject, eating biscuits in bed. Will you tell us something about that, starting now?
Eating biscuits in bed is something which I very seldom do, because, frankly, I don't possess any pyjamas. My wife doesn't have a nightie, so it makes it desperately uncomfortable if you do have these biscuits in bed, because the crumbs go absolutely everywhere and get caught up in the most unlikely places. It's really totally horrid.
Clement Freud's challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Well, it's even more unlikely if you wear pyjamas and nighties, isn't it? A more unlikely thing. There are more unlikely places for biscuit crumbs to get to. The more you have on.
Actually, though it was very embarrassing, I think that Derek's point that there were more unlikely places if you're not wearing pyjamas.
Deviation. I wasn't in the least embarrassed. Neither was anybody else here. I didn't see one red face. Nobody was embarrassed. Were they, Derek?
That's cool.
I don't think so.
No, not embarrassed at all.
Anyway, I disagree with the
No,
challenge.
we're not having that. Well, you've got to go back on it and say, yes, I'm sorry, you're quite right, it wasn't embarrassing. You ought to apologise, making these ridiculous assumptions, misleading everyone into imagining the audience
I think you should
embarrassed.
shut up for a minute.
Oh, that's a nice way to talk to a cult figure, isn't it? Why don't you shut up? That's a nice thing to say, isn't it? But that's very nice. Good manners.
I think some of the audience seem to agree anyway. So, Derek, you continue on with the subject. There are 43 seconds on eating biscuits in bed, starting
I remember
now.
one time I was eating biscuits in bed. It wasn't so much really. I was nibbling a crumpet, I think.
Well, deviation. If it was a crumpet, it wasn't a biscuit, was it? Deviation.
I agree, Kenneth. So you take the subject of 20 with 22 seconds, eating biscuits in bed, starting now.
I do this when I'm staying in luxurious hotels and they send up this delicious plate of Garibaldi's, which I specially request, because I love those little currants stuck in top of them, and I eat them with a kind of relish which I would not display in...
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
Relish with biscuits.
A very good challenge, but he wasn't referring to that particular relish that you eat. So another point for Clement Freud, because we like the challenges. Keep them coming. 6 seconds are left with Kenneth still eating biscuits in bed, starting now.
And then it occurred when it was a chocolate one, and the landlady said there's a very
Clement
nasty
Freud
stain.
challenge.
That's deviation. There are no chocolate Garibaldi biscuits.
But he wasn't.
I
He's
wasn't
got a
discussing that. I've gone on
way
to another
away.
thing about biscuits, and there's
Long-
chocolate biscuits, you know, you're great.
You've got a long way away from Garibaldi. So, Kenneth, 1.5 seconds left on eating biscuits in bed, starting now.
And when they said, hardening...
Kenneth is still keeping his lead, and Clement Freud begins the next round. The subject, Clement, describing myself to the listener. Will you tell us something, or do that, in the game, starting now?
Well, as the listeners can see, I'm wearing a blue tie and am sitting next to a cult figure who tends to sing "Love is a Something Thing" every now and again at weekly intervals. My shoes are size 10 wide-fitting. Socks tend to be blue, navy.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
2 blue.
Oh, yes, you had a blue tie, and now you've got blue socks.
Yes. Well done.
So, Derek, you have the subject, and there are 37.5 seconds describing myself to the listener, starting now.
Middle-aged, white Caucasian male, prematurely greying his forehead.
Deviation. He looks like a young juvenile. It's ridiculous. This fashion. He's just doing himself down. He's doing himself no good. I won't have it. I won't hear him denigrate himself like this. You all agree he looks lovely, don't you? There you are. It's deviation. He was misdirecting there.
But he was still speaking the truth.
What kind of chairman is he?
I try to be fair and accurate. No, I mean, he does look like a juvenile, and he acts like a juvenile. But he was being very honest in saying that he was middle-aged. And to be middle-aged and look like Derek Nimmo is a great achievement. So he wasn't deviating. So, Derek, you continue with the subject, and there are 33 seconds describing myself to the listener, starting now.
Beetle-browed, deep-set eyes of a lustreless hue. It's a funny thing to say, isn't it?
Yes, and a hesitation. 26 seconds for you, Kenneth. Now, describing myself to the listeners, starting now.
Well, it is a pity you cannot be here to see the lovely that I am actually composed of. The eyes have been described as Mediterranean blue. And since I come under that star-sign Pisces, I am enormously fond of water. Nothing pleases more than to be sailing on the yacht, or even taking the tiller in a moment of abandon. I have been known to do that.
Well, this is a most unusual show in the sense that Kenneth Williams keeps getting the subject, keeps speaking until the whistle goes, and keeps increasing his lead. Graham Garden, you begin the next round, please. The subject, Boadicea, or Boudica, as some people, I believe, pronounce it. But whichever way, would you talk on the subject for 60 seconds, if you can, starting now?
Boadicea, or Boudica, as she is more often, or rather more correctly called...
Clement Freud.
2 mores.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Clement, you're in there with 54 seconds left on Boadicea, starting now.
I've never had her called Boudica, but Bo, as I know her by, had horses and galloped, trotted, walked, cantered, horses, cows.
Graham.
Horses.
No, horse, and then horses.
I thought you said she had horses.
Plural.
I thought he said she had horses and then went on to describe what the horses did.
I was going to put it to the audience, but they've responded themselves spontaneously. We have a very spontaneous audience here. So, 42 seconds for you on Boadicea, Graham, starting now.
Boadicea was the queen of a tribe known as the Iceni, the Pathfinders, and they lived in the fens of Norfolk in the cold, windswept...
Clement Freud challenge.
Fens of Cambridgeshire.
Yes, the fens are not in Norfolk. Some in Lincolnshire and
Oh,
some
they were
in Cambridgeshire.
then.
Clement, 31 seconds on Boadicea, starting now.
Just at the top of the mall, there's a statue to Queen Boadicea.
Kenneth Williams,
The statue to Boadicea is not at the top of the mall.
Depends from which end you come.
There is no way you could describe it as the top of the mall.
Kenneth, you still have the subject, and you have 23 seconds on Boadicea, starting now.
Responsible for the pillaging and the sacking and the burning, indeed, of London at one point, and everyone fled in terror from her. She's often held up as a great resistance leader against what was...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Not everyone fled in terror. That's why she took poison at the end, wasn't it?
Yes, but I'm not talking about
didn't.
that period.
You said
I'm talking-
everyone fled in terror.
Oh dear, we can't get into this.
You
I
can't
think
get
that
into
was a
history
good
enough
challenge.
about history, you ignorant great nit. I didn't know he couldn't run a Welsh stall.
I agree.
It's a joke, isn't it?
I agree with Derek Nimmo that some people did stand and fight, so not everyone ran in terror. So, Derek, you have 11 seconds on the subject of Boadicea, starting now.
Fortunately, on the Isle of Anglesey, the Roman general Paulinius was waiting and came across the sea and did battle with her. And because she had a point on her side, because they raped her daughters, you know. I've forgotten about that. Rape, terrible rape.
No, you've been challenged. Before the rape, you were challenged.
Well, I know, but I thought
Well, he'd forgotten about it. He'd forgotten about it, so he hesitated.
He hesitated, he did indeed. Graham, you've got him with 2.5 seconds on Boadicea, starting now.
Boadicea never actually ran a whelk stall, but had...
Graham's nice line not only kept him going to the whistle when gained the extra point, but also brings the round and the game to a close. So now I give you the final score. In the contest this week, Clement Freud for once finished in 4th place. Most unusual for him, but he was very generous in the way he played the game. In 3rd place, we welcome back Graham Garden, who did very well. He was only just behind Derek Nimmo in 2nd place, but way out in a predominant lead. Never such a lead has he had before. 8 points ahead of the number 2 in the game. It was Kenneth Williams, our winner. So let me tell you that we finished the game. We've enjoyed playing it. We hope you at home have enjoyed listening and want to tune in again same time next week when we take to the air and we play Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, John Junkin, Tim Rice and Maureen Lipman in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much indeed. And once again, we have a lovely looking audience here in the Paris theatre of the BBC. And we have some lovely looking panellists. We have one regular, as you just heard, the irrepressible Kenneth Williams. We have 2 guests who played it before, Tim Rice and John Junkin. And we welcome for the first time that lovely actress and beautiful star, Maureen Lipman, to time. And we will try and play the game as we usually do, trying to understand the rules, and I will try and interpret them. And we'll start the show this week with Tim Rice. Tim, the subject to begin with, which Ian Mester's conjured up, is a very long one. It's called My Intellectual Approach to the 6 Pips of the Greenwich Time Signal. If you can remember all that, you can actually repeat that in the show, as you know. And you have 60 seconds to talk on the subject, starting now.
Whenever I hear these 6 pips of the Greenwich Time Signal, my mind races and my intellectual approach is truly staggering. Firstly, I think, here we are, Greenwich, the centre of the world. What an honour it is for our country that every other place in the world, be it in...
John Junkin is challenged.
2 worlds?
There were 2 worlds and we only have one.
Rotten, unsporting start.
It's all part of the game. Oh. Tim, I'm sorry, John, you have a correct challenge, so you get a point for that, and you take over the subject.
And it's this, my intellectual approach to the 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal, and 45 seconds starting now.
My intellectual approach to these 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal is such that when I hear the 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal, my intellectual approach to them is that I consider they are a work of art. These 6 pips from the Greenwich time signal and my intellectual approach to them.
Maureen Lipman has challenged.
Does boredom count for deviation?
Oh, no.
Oh, it doesn't.
I think the programme would have finished long ago if it had. But there is a point where if he repeats it too often, one does have to make a decision.
Oh, you're changing the rules.
No, we're just interpreting them. I mean, listen, if you started to make a nonsense of the game by repeating that incessantly throughout...
Could he perhaps talk about 18 pips and save us a bit of time there?
He can do whatever he
3
likes.
sets of 6.
Yes. John, you have the subject still another point, and there are 26 seconds on the subject starting now.
The subject being my intellectual approach to the 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal. I can recall the days when the 6 pips were equal in length. However, in recent times, one of them has been extended. I believe the last pip of the...
And Kenneth Williams has challenged.
I do believe.
Yes, you did say I believe twice.
I did.
And,
I do believe.
It was a great song, but not in just a minute. There are 13 seconds for you, Kenneth, having got a point for a correct challenge, to take over the subject of my intellectual approach to the 6 pips of the Greenwich time signal, starting now.
Well, my approach to these 6 pips is an epistographic, to speak lightly, because I have never actually heard with my eardrums, that is, these number of pips being transmitted.
Maureen, you challenged.
Well, yes, because how can you hear with anything else?
Oh, you can.
Will you try and tell us how?
It's a special, I said with my eardrums, there's another way they can get you to hear.
Well, try and justify.
They actually attach nodes to the body.
But that's somebody else. That is somebody else doing it, and you said, I actually heard it with my eardrums, so there's no other way. Deviation, Maureen. So you have half a second on this subject, starting now.
Well, my intellectual approach...
So a good start for our guest. In order to give her encouragement, she got in just before the whistle, gets a point for speaking as the whistle went, as anybody does if they do that, and so she's in the lead at the end of that round, alongside John Junkin, and Kenneth Williams begins the second round. Kenneth, the subject is fibs. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
One of the most notorious fibs which has been handed down until it's become, I think, almost apocryphal, is the one about the Borgias poisoning people, and the lie was given to it by Frederick Rolfe, or, as he was sometimes styled, Baron Corvo, when he said in his book on that famous family, they could no more have done such a thing.
Maureen Lipman.
Did he say family twice? The Borgia families, and when he said in the book...
No, he said the Borgias before.
I
Borgia
apologise.
family. So,
I
Kenneth,
just heard
you
it with
have
my
a
ears.
point for an incorrect challenge. You keep
Just ruined the tagline, that's all. Well, into every life a little rain must fall, and I'm obviously about to be drenched.
I disagree with Maureen's challenge. So you have a point for that. So you're gaining. You're in the lead. You have 33 seconds on fibs, starting now.
I was enlightened about another fib quite recently in a book which told me there was...
Tim Rice has challenged.
We've had book before.
Not in this round.
Not in this round, no.
Great fool.
No, we did.
Shut your mouth, shut your mouth.
I support this gentleman.
He was going on about...
When did he say, which book was that?
All the one about the Borgias. It was, boring, but he mentioned the word book.
He did.
He definitely did.
Such a long time. So much has happened when Kenneth talks in between the taking
But
up.
your
Yes,
job as chairman is to remember these things.
Yes, I know.
How dare you?
But it is not your job as a panellist to remind me of that fact.
No, you want to keep him in his proper station.
I know. Yes, I would call...
Isn't it?
yes,
People come
definitely.
here, just one appearance and start getting uppity. It's a joke, isn't it?
I would call it Cock Foster's, is one station.
I see what you mean about cocky, yeah. You're right.
Right, let's... but I will still give it to you. I will show you how fair I am in
You're
spite
very
of it,
fair, very fair.
Tim. And you have 26 seconds on fibs, starting now.
One of the most famous fibs in history is "your cheque is in the post." Every time this phrase is uttered, be it by somebody who normally tells the truth or somebody who
Maureen.
Somebody.
Yes. So, Maureen, you come in with the correct challenge there, and you have the subject of fibs, and there are 15 seconds starting now.
I myself have never ever told a fib, and that in itself, many of you may guess, is in fact a fib. Now, some people, yes.
John Junkin challenged.
Hesitation?
No.
She said yes. She's an honest lady. She said yes.
You ungallant player.
I am, indeed. I'm desperate to win.
Maureen, you keep the subject. Wrong
Fair enough.
challenge, too.
Oh, I keep...
There are, yes, 7 seconds on fibs starting now.
Well, often when your children tell you a fib, it's a very endearing moment, isn't it? Especially when it's the sort of fib that you can see from their faces right away.
Maureen Lipman, our guest, who's first time on the show, was speaking as the whistle went, gained that extra point, and she has increased her lead ahead of Kenneth Williams at the end of that round. John Junkin and Tim Rice trailing a little, and John Junkin, your turn to begin. The subject, come-uppance. Will you tell us something about that subject in the game, starting now?
Getting your come-uppance means receiving what is coming to you, your just desserts. This is one particular aspect of the phrase. It can also be used in conjunction with a now-defunct lady who gave her name to a device that saved airmen during the war, Mae West. She used to say, "Come up and see me sometime." I think, however, that this was a different connotation, and what is actually intended by the phrase is a moment...
Maureen Lipman.
Phrase, you said that already.
Yes, you used the word phrase.
Did I?
She listens
That's
well,
not
doesn't
like
she?
Yes.
Yes. So, Maureen, very bright. 33 seconds on comeuppance, starting now.
I once had my comeuppance in a shop in the Lake District because I went in there and the lady behind the counter said to me, "Are you the girl in that programme Ugly?" And I...
Tim Rice challenged.
I thought there was hesitation.
I agree with that time, yes.
Right.
I mean, once you mention the word ugly and you look at Maureen Lipman, anybody would hesitate. So, there are...
Take yours off as well. Go on.
That
would sound good on radio.
Yeah. Nicholas, yes. Do you think you should explain for the benefit of people listening what she meant?
John, that was one of the occasions when I wasn't going to explain. Because I thought all the listeners would think how lucky I was, you see. And if I explained, they might say, well, so what? I took my glasses off and Maureen took her glasses off and we snapped specs and, you can't get very... but still, it's one of those moments to treasure, even if not to get very emotional about. There are 24 seconds on comeuppance. Who challenged? It was Tim Rice. It was correct, Tim. Starting now.
Every so often in this wonderfully strenuous and intellectual game, you get a subject that is so unutterably uninteresting, it is almost impossible to think of anything whatsoever to say about it, and such a subject is comeuppance.
What? John Junkin.
Deviation. He's not actually talking about the subject.
Yes,
He's talking about not being able to talk about the subject.
No.
You were, sir.
You're being too devious, I think, in your challenge for words. No, I think he was maintaining his point. He was talking on the subject of comeuppance and saying it was...
a subject you couldn't talk about.
Yeah, but he was achieving it. So that's what Just a Minute's all about.
Quite right. You're a wonderful chairman.
Oh, dear.
You're playing Kenneth Williams' game
right
now. 11 seconds with you, Tim, on comeuppance, starting now.
There we had a wonderful example of rather
Maureen Lipman.
You did say wonderful early on.
You did indeed, Tim.
Give over.
But you are wonderful. You did.
Maureen, you have the subject back, comeuppance, and there are 8 seconds, starting now.
So there I buzzed myself. So there I was in this remote part of the area that I mentioned before, and in the shop, the lady...
John Junkin challenge.
2 shops.
You went into the shop again, I'm afraid. It's an awfully difficult game, isn't it, really? I don't think I don't realise how difficult. 4 seconds for John Junkin, come up and starting now.
I suppose that Maureen has just had a comeuppance insofar as I...
John Junkin was speaking as the whistle went. Gained the extra point. The score is interesting. John Junkin and Tim Rice are 1 ahead of Kenneth Williams. They're in second place, trailing Maureen Lipman, our first-time guest, who's still in the lead. And Maureen, it's your turn to begin. The subject that Ian Mester thought of, rather nice one, it's the art of enjoyment. So can you tell us something on that in 60 seconds, starting now?
The art of enjoyment is a great deal to do with the ability to savour the moment as it happens, not dwell on the past, not think about the future, but really...
John Junkin has challenged.
Not. Who's there?
Who's there?
She said not dwell on the past, not think of the future.
We do resist the temptation when someone's just started to challenge on such small words as not and but.
You're changing the rules again, Nick.
What I've said before, I try to interpret them in order to be fair to everybody and keep some semblance of a game going, because if you challenge, immediately everybody opens their mouth, you do destroy, the audience's enjoyment of the whole thing.
You mean you're cheating?
I have to do a bit of that in the game.
As long as that's clear, fine. Yeah.
So we won't give any points for that, and let Maureen continue with the subject of the art of enjoyment, 50 seconds, starting now.
I was sitting at a concert, an open-air one, in the Kenwood lakeside, and Brahms and Liszt were floating across the lake, and we had a bottle of wine, and next to me was...
John Junkin.
Brahms and Liszt can't both float at the same time.
Was he there?
Unless you are Brahms and Liszt at the time.
In the course of the evening.
In the course of the evening were Brahms and Liszt. I wouldn't admit that. What were you challenging for, seriously, John?
It is deviation. You can't have two composers playing simultaneously, even in the Lake District.
There are 40 seconds for you, Maureen, on the art of enjoyment, starting now.
So, with the punchline floating well out of the window, my mother was sitting beside me.
Tim Rice is challenged.
2 floatings.
Yes.
Brahms and Liszt is floating around
Yes.
Aren't I a rotter?
Well,
you
listen.
are, but you're clever.
Yes. They're all clever.
And tall.
Thank you.
In fact, they're all so clever, it makes my job very difficult. No one got that. 36 seconds, the art of enjoyment, with you, Tim, starting now.
I think the key to enjoying oneself is really to relax, to make sure that every single fibre of your body is cool and in repose. If this is the case, then it is extremely simple to enjoy yourself. Let me give you an example.
Maureen Lipman.
To enjoy yourself is not on the card.
The art of enjoyment's on the card, and you did say enjoy yourself.
Terribly right, very clever.
Yes, she's very sharp, isn't she?
You're
yes.
very pretty, too.
One woman on the show, and she's having to fight for the female sex and make sure she can hold her own with the rest, and she is doing that magnificently. Maureen, there are 9 seconds on the art of enjoyment, starting now.
So, as the lullaby wafted across to me, my mother turned to me and...
John.
Well, she's had 2 mothers.
They were both with me.
So, John, you got in there, and there are 4 seconds on the art of enjoyment with you, starting now.
The true secret of the art of enjoyment is total relaxation and indulgence.
So, John Junkin got that extra point this time, speaking as the whistle went. He's equal with Tim Rice in that he's the same position, actually. They're both trailing Maureen Lipman, and they're both ahead of Kenneth Williams. And Maureen, you're still in the lead. And Tim, it's your turn to begin. The subject is good food. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Yes, certainly. I will tell you something about good food, the subject on the card. Let me describe my ideal meal. I would like to start with fried egg. Maybe 3 or 4 of these objects which come out of the rear quarters of chickens. I'm getting a bit biological here, but I'm sure you'll bear with me. With these aforesaid objects that...
Kenneth Williams, the chap.
Had the objects right.
Yes, I'm afraid so. It's awfully difficult,
yes,
isn't it? Right.
Strange.
So, Kenneth, good food is the subject. There are 42 seconds left. You've gathered yourself, obviously, from the audience reaction, and you start now.
I shall start off with a blue trout in a white wine sauce, and properly wash that down with a little pouet. Go on to some beef with claret.
John Junkin challenged.
That was less of savouring and more of hesitation.
I disagree. I was savouring every moment of it, and he didn't actually hesitate. And the audience agree, I can tell that. Kenneth, you have another point. You have 30 seconds. You've got to the second course, and you start now.
Then apple à la mode, Benedictine, and coffee. Cheese, probably to follow, but only if they have the Stilton. And
Maureen Lipman challenged.
Have we had to follow twice? Did we to follow earlier?
I'm afraid we did. You had the word follow before.
Oh, did I?
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't, because I said followed by, and this time I said That would be to follow. Yes, that's
You're
actually
right,
said
you
right.
did.
No, I said follow the
I agree, Kenneth, you did.
That's
I'm
right,
glad you
thank you.
listened to yourself.
That's right.
So you have another point and you keep the subject and you have 18 seconds on good food starting now.
It's good food, is it?
Yes.
I could have sworn it was Arturo Toscanini.
What did you think you were talking on? Comeuppance?
No, I keep thinking of that week we was doing Arturo Toscanini.
Yeah.
It's become a sort of obsession with me. Even as my head hits the pillow, a voice seems to say, Arturo! Anyway, good food, you say. Starting when?
18 seconds, good food starting now.
It can include crayfish, of which I am inordinately fond, particularly the lobster, done with that particular kind of dressing, which I think can be...
Maureen Lipman.
Took her long enough, didn't it?
No, he said particularly and particular. He didn't actually. I had to listen very
You've got to
carefully.
listen properly, you great fool.
It's awfully difficult.
So busy
He's back
marching
on
across
ears
the lake.
again, you see. He's got to think about
Marching
ears.
across the lake with Mozart and Liszt. Oh, you have to laugh, don't you? Well, you don't have to.
The trouble is, I enjoy it so much, I forget to listen sometimes. There are 6 seconds on good food. Still with you, Kenneth, starting now.
But I suppose what takes the prize for me above all else is a Christmas pudding.
At the beginning of that round, Kenneth Williams was trailing in a very weak 4th place. At the end of that round, Kenneth Williams is in the lead. But he is in the lead alongside Maureen Lipman, our guest, because she's doing extremely well. And John Junkin and Tim Rice are doing almost as well. They're not far behind, equal in 2nd place. Kenneth, following good food, the next subject that Ian Mester's come along with is my worst meal. And it's your turn to begin, so can you tell us something about that and the game starting now?
It is something I shall never forget. It was in theatrical digs, and the landlady had a book in which every other actor who'd stayed there had written, "What about Mrs. Smith's delicious lemon pie? We shall never forget," and then the aforementioned object.
Tim Rice.
Two forgets. You began by saying something I shall never forget, and we just had another
Well, you
forget.
just done yourself out of here in this very funny story. It's your own loss, dear, on your own head, dear. That is your actual comeuppance, isn't it? That is then your comeuppance.
Well, the audience come up. Anyway, fine. We may come back and have the rest of the story at the end of the round, but in the meantime, Tim did have a correct challenge, so he takes the subject of my worst meal, and 43 seconds starting now.
The worst meal I ever had was in a transport cafe on the A303, quite near Wincarnis, or is it Wincanton? I can never remember.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation, we're interested in the meal, not the geography, dear.
My worst meal, the ambience of a meal is just as important as the food.
Yes, but as Wincarnis is not on the A303, you were definitely deviating, and Kenneth has the subject back, and there...
He's a marvellous chairman, you see. It's a proper judgment of everything.
36 seconds for you, Kenneth, on my worst meal starting now.
So this revolting stuff was brought into the room, and the girl, Annette, put hers into a briefcase, and the other man put his into the Times and chucked it through the window. I went...
Tim Rice has challenged.
Hesitation. You could have driven a truck through that pause.
No! 21 seconds on my worst meal. Still with you, Kenneth, starting now.
I retired to the loo and kept pulling the chain, but it wouldn't go down. It kept coming back like a song, you know.
Kenneth, Tim has challenged again, I'm afraid.
What's the matter with him?
Well, I find this story rather repulsive, and I'm trying to stop it. But there was an enormous hesitation.
Persona repulsive.
There was a definite hesitation there. I mean, there was enough for the audience to have a real good short
you
one.
could have had him on kept, which he said 3 times.
And I was about to say...
No, it's too late now. But he didn't hesitate. The audience were going with him, and he was pushing it up, he was flushing it away, and he wasn't quite achieving it. The image was there. Kenneth, we're still with you, and there are 13 seconds, my worst meal, starting now.
In Singapore, they served a banana split, and it had definitely gone off.
John Junkin.
Is he allowed to start 3 totally different stories without
Yes.
it being called deviation?
Yes.
We've had the lemon meringue pie, Annette in the toilet, and we've now got Singapore.
Oh, you mean your challenge is that if the other one was his worst meal, this one couldn't have been. It must have been
Exactly.
the second worst meal.
He's had
That's
3
a good
worst
challenge,
meals.
John. 9 seconds for you, John Junkin. My worst meal starting now.
My worst meal was of the instant variety. I purchased a package which claimed to contain the ingredients of a spaghetti bolognese. The cheese...
So John Junkin once again was speaking as the whistle went, and again is moving forward, catching up our leader, Kenneth Williams. Maureen Lipman's only 1 point behind, and Tim Rice is still there with a chance as Maureen Lipman begins the next round, and the subject is fads. Can you tell us something about that in the game, Maureen, starting now?
I'm a sucker for fads. Health food, jogging. Isn't it extraordinary how the minute you buy your shoes, you stop running? I had hula hoops. Now, there's a funny thing. You walk to school with a big piece of red plastic around you, gyrating backwards and forwards. Yo-yos. Does anybody remember those?
Tim Rice's challenge.
Repeat of yo.
It's a correct challenge. It's a correct challenge. You see, that's what the game's all about, and it's those good challenges that make it exciting. So,
well, who remembers a yo?
I think the thing is, Maureen, it's very bad luck on you, but it's a good challenge, so we give it to Tim, and there are 43 seconds on fads starting now.
When my mother gave me a yo back in 1945, I was extremely happy with it for a long time, until it was replaced in my affections one day by that amazing fad, that craze called a Rubik Cube. I'm sure you all know what these little devils are all about. They are a square thing, but no, in fact, they're cubes.
Hesitation.
Yes, I
and
agree with that
Yes,
one. Yes.
total collapse.
So,
of Star
Maureen,
Party.
you have another point, and the subject, of course, and 23 seconds on fads starting now.
One of the fads that I refuse to adhere to is design...
John Junkin challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think so. I think she
It was
did.
on the tip of my brain.
No, but we should have it on the tip of your tongue more quickly. It was, I think, just hesitation. We're in the last round. It's all very close. You're equal in the lead with Kenneth Williams, and John Junkin is 2 behind, and Tim Rice is 3
That's
behind.
no excuse.
And no, but it adds to the excitement,
Oh, so it
doesn't
does,
it?
fine.
But actually, no, I do think it was hesitation. I really do. And so John has the subject, and there are 18 seconds on fads starting now.
There are fads not only in toys, but in almost every other aspect of life. Fashion has its fads. Music also has its fads.
Kenneth Williams.
3 hits.
Well, there were 3, I agree. If there had been 2, I'd have said no, because that would have been too keen. Kenneth, you come in with 9 seconds to go in the last round. The subject is fads starting now.
I've fallen under the spell of so many fads, it's almost impossible to list them, from skateboarding to sucking kumquats.
Well, Kenneth Williams' last flamboyant moments and gestures brings the show to a close, and I will give you the final score. Tim Rice, coming back again from his previous triumphs, was only just in 4th place behind John Junkin, our other guest, who was only 1 point behind Maureen Lipman. First time on the show, she almost won, but she's finished in 2nd place. So a special round of applause for Maureen, please. But 2 points ahead was this week's winner, Kenneth Williams. The win has meant so much to Kenneth Williams. He's literally taken off to flight, doing his Peter Pan act. Unfortunately, he hasn't got the wires to support him. He will have more of Just a Minute if you decide to tune in at the same time next week when we'll be on the air. We'll be playing this game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Derek Nimmo, Peter Jones and Gyles Brandreth in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello, welcome again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, this week we have 3 of our regular players, and we welcome Gyles Brandreth as our guest. Nobly coming to do battle with these 3 intrepid players of the game who got so many tricks they've mastered over the years of winning in Just a Minute. And once again, they're all going to try and speak if they can on the subject I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And this week, we begin the show with Kenneth Williams, and Kenneth, the subject, being nosy. Will you tell us something about that? In the game, starting now.
I was being very nosy once when I opened a book which contained confidential recommendations, and I thought, well, I'll look at what they say about me. And what I found was not, I'm here to tell you, to my pleasure. I found they'd say, well, he'd be more
Gyles Brandreth is challenged.
I wanted really to protect your secrets and keep them safe, really, but he repeated found.
Yes, I'm afraid
what I found.
Repeat found. So, Gyles, you've got in... And for our listeners, I tell you that laugh is because Kenneth has become overcome with embarrassment, and now he's eyeing his man who's sitting next to him, which is Gyles Brandreth, who's got him with the first challenge, and so he gets a point for that and takes over the subject with 41 seconds left. Being nosy, starting now.
The world's most professional nosy parkers are, of course, the KGB, and I have had personal experience at their hands when I visited Moscow some years ago. I was invited as a guest of the Soviet government as a consequence of my children's stories relating to moles. They are long stories with blunt end...
Peter Jones challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think there was just a hesitation there, Peter, so let's hear from you on the subject of being nosy. And there are 22 seconds left, starting now.
There's a great deal to be said in favour of it, because if you don't become nosy, you very rarely find out anything worth knowing. Because people tend to conceal and not to reveal information, particularly when it is of a secretive nature. And that, after all, is very often the only thing you really want to find out.
Well, when the ambassador blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever's speaking at that moment gains the extra point. It was Peter Jones who's in the lead at the end of that round, and they all resist the temptation to talk about the Parsons nose, I'm pleased to say. Derek, will you take the next round? The subject, faces suitable for custard pies. There's the subject. A good one for radio. 60 seconds, starting now.
I will not resist the temptation not to talk about the Parsons nose, because I can think of no more suitable recipient for the average custard pie than the chairman of this game, if that is what is meant by the question. Very curious one, isn't it? Faces suitable for custard pies. Does the chairman mean that we have to chuck the thing into his gizzard?
Gyles Brandreth challenge.
We've had chairman twice. The chairman of this program.
I'm afraid,
does the chairman mean?
So, Gyles, you take over the subject of faces suitable for custard pies with 40 seconds to go, starting now.
Mine own has been a face considered occasionally suitable for a custard pie, for when I once applied for an Arts Council grant, it was considered a good idea that I should wear a custard pie on the occasion. Then think...
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. I mean, we all know this audience is not going to be misled. I mean, to say that you get into a university by wearing a custard pie. Are we seriously asked to believe this rubbish?
I don't know.
It's deviation of the most appalling kind.
It might, but he hasn't actually deviated from the subject on the card. This might well be accurate, what he's telling us. It might be in the realms of fantasy, which he'll establish in a moment. I don't think it's a correct challenge in the game, Kenneth. So Gyles keeps the subject. 27 seconds, starting now. Peter Jones' challenge.
Hesitation.
Full stop, I would have said. 25 seconds for you, Pete, on faces suitable for custard pie, starting now.
I always think the comedic value of throwing a custard pie into somebody's face is very much overrated, and it's actually never amused me, even when I was a child.
Gyles Brandreth.
Hesitation, even when I was the memory failed
I
him
think
there.
so, yes. 15 seconds on faces suitable for custard pies, Gyles, starting now.
There is no doubt that...
Peter Jones' challenge. Hesitation. Yes. 13 seconds on the subject, Peter, starting now.
But I must admit that however one views it...
Gyles Brandreth.
Hesitation without any doubt at all.
10 seconds for you, Gyles, on faces suitable for custard
There is no doubt at all that the reason that Kenneth was so sensitive was that his younger sister, Shirley, has often been the victim of custard pies throughout her long and varied political career. Many is the occasion on which one has come across the...
Gyles was speaking as the whistle went, and he's in the lead at the end of the round, one ahead of Peter Jones, and Kenneth Williams and Derek are training a little. And Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, future inventions. Will you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
I would like to think that among the new inventions of the future, one would be included which would render useless and inoperable the invention...
Kenneth Williams,
hesitation.
I agree, Kenneth. So you take over the subject of future inventions, and there are 48 seconds left, starting now.
I hope that among the future inventions there'll be one for stopping the grapefruit juice or the lemon going into your eye when you poke it, because I've often had the occasion when that's gone on, and it's resulted in the most awful pain, you know, because it has a stingy effect, isn't it? The other thing they ought to invent, too, is non-slip steps, so that when you go down them, you don't fall over, and when you go up... Who challenged?
Gyles Brandreth,
He's
sitting
very
beside
sharp,
you.
isn't he?
Yes, very sharp, isn't he? Yes. So, Gyles, you've got in with the correct challenge and 23 seconds on future inventions starting now. Kenneth Williams' challenge. Hesitation, yes. He doesn't get going as rapidly as some of my games. 21 seconds on future inventions, Kenneth, starting now.
And the other invention that I would like very much to see is one that allows you to levitate without ever having to bother about traffic jams. And you would simply rise above it, so to speak, and you'd never be caught up in an entanglement of any kind. And thus you would reach your destination with
So, Kenneth
I
Williams...
hope I didn't sound affected there.
No, you just sounded normal.
Oh, right. Only I was trying to drag it out so I could win, you see. Yeah. I'll be quite honest with you. That is my aim here.
Yeah, is it? You've come all the way from Great Portland Street to win. Well, it doesn't always show by results, Kenneth. We look upon the value that you contribute. And you're in third place. You've got some points in that round, but you haven't caught up with Peter Jones and Gyles Brandreth yet. And Gyles begins the next round. The subject, bloomers. Will you tell us something about those in the game, Gyles, starting now?
To many people, bloomers are verbal slips, such as when the field marshal addresses the officer and says, "Ah, Captain, I see you're playing with your privates." But the sort of bloomers that we are speaking of are, in fact, named after that great Victorian pioneer of feminism, Amelia Jenks Bloomer. Now, Amelia Jenks Bloomer was a lady of...
Nimmo,
we had two Amelia Jenks Bloomers. Well, I thought that was quite disgusting, actually. I know Kenneth was deeply shocked, weren't you, Kenneth?
He's so shocked he's still laughing. Derek, let's get back to just a minute. You have a correct challenge on Amelia, and there are 38 seconds for you on the subject of bloomers, starting now.
Amelia Bloomer invented these things called bloomers, and they went right down to the ankle, and they were part of the kind of women's liberation of the day. That's why they did not become frightfully
Peter
popular.
Jones has challenged.
They didn't go down as far as the ankle.
They did.
They went just below the knee.
Well, some of them went... Gyles?
I think I should speak here because they came just between the ankle and the...
knee.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
well, some of them might have gone down, but they didn't all go
Well,
down.
you've heard of people's bloomers having slipped.
We're not talking about a very small person wearing huge bloomers, you know. We're talking about normal people.
You did establish that they all went down, Derek, so I think Peter's challenge must stand, and there are 30 seconds on bloomers with you, Peter, starting now.
Bloomers is the title of a German farce. The author's name, I'm afraid I've forgotten, but it's an amusing piece because it is all built round a woman who loses her bloomers on her way to catch a bus. And they fall round her feet. She steps out of them, picks them up, and the resultant drama involves the bystanders who witness this scene and her husband, who's terribly embarrassed by it. And he takes it up.
What does he take up, the bloomers or something else?
No, he takes up the case because, well, I'm not going to say something...
Well, you won't have a chance to say it again in just a minute. If you want to tell us the payoff.
Well, I think I'll wait for a better opportunity.
Well, if the series comes back next year, perhaps you'll tune in and see whatever happened to that fellow who picked up the ladies' bloomers. Peter, you got a point, of course, of speaking as the whistle went, and you're back in the lead alongside Gyles Brandreth, and Kenneth follows, and then Derek Nimmo, and Kenneth begins the next round. Kenneth, the subject is marshmallows. Will you tell us something about those in the game, starting now?
Amelia Bloomer was sucking one when she came to promote her cause, and she threw her crinoline away while the public cried, "What-oh," and she walked about in drawers. Actually, of course, the marshmallows in question at the time were, naturally speaking, Victorian marshmallows. Now, you may well ask, what's the difference between those and the ones you can purchase in any confectioner's today? Well, it's a very interesting differential. I was clever there because I did repeat myself. Because the sugar came from Demerara, you see. Now, this, as you know, is a long way away from England. And the
Peter Jones...
It's Tipperara that's a long way.
So what is your challenge?
No, deviation. I mean,
right.
he was talking about something else, wasn't
He
he?
got onto the subject of sugar, not marshmallows.
Yes,
Right,
sugar,
Peter.
that's right. Yes.
24 seconds for you with marshmallows starting now.
Well, they're quite good if they're toasted, I believe. I haven't ever experienced one, but that's what I've been told. The white of egg, which is one of the main ingredients of a marshmallow, is particularly effective when it has been held in front of a bonfire or even a small...
Gyles Brandreth, Charles.
Yes, I think a little bit of hesitation there.
There definitely was. He couldn't think of another thing to substitute for fire. So there are 5 seconds on marshmallows, Gyles, with you starting now.
Billy Bunter loved marshmallows. Oh, crikey, he would cry when his pater's latest hamper arrived. Absolutely.
So Gyles Brandreth, our guest, got in with only a few seconds left, kept going to the whistle, and has increased his lead. He's one ahead of Peter Jones, and a little bit more ahead of Kenneth Williams and Derek Nimmo in that order, and Derek begins the next round. The subject is Halley's Comet. Derek, can you tell us something about it in the game, starting now?
If you mean the comet that is about to reappear in 1986, the correct pronunciation is Halley's Comet and not Halley's Comet, but that is the subject on the card, so I'm afraid I have to mispronounce the word, and I do apologize to the audience. I happen to be a member of the Halley's Comet Society, and therefore I'm going with a lot of chums. We're hiring an aeroplane and flying off in the aforementioned year, which is in the future, as I said, to actually witness this great thing, which was, I suppose, one of the chief thing on the...
Gyles Brandreth.
I think we really were getting a little bit confused and hesitating there.
So your challenge is?
I'm hesitation.
Yes, I think there was hesitation. So you have the subject of Halley, or, as we most of us say, or Hawley, as Derek Nimmo and his erudite chums say, Comet, and 31 seconds left, starting now.
Halley's comet comes from the same family as the famous orchestra, except that the original Halley was himself an amateur astronomer who lived 300 years ago. He was the Patrick Moore of his generation, and one evening he was out with his funny eye looking up at the sky, wondering what he was going to see next. And what did he see but a comet? Aha! He rushed into the observatory at Greenwich and said to Mrs. Halley, "You won't believe it, darling, I've just seen the most extraordinary thing." And here we are, 300 years later, of the original...
Well, that's another way to play Just a Minute. Keep going with such speed and panache that they don't notice the repetitions. So well done, Gyles. You've increased your lead at the end of that round. And Peter Jones takes the next round, which is the British sausage. Even a bit difficult to say, the British sausage. 60 seconds, as usual, Peter, starting now.
The British sausage has really ceased to interest me since I became a vegetarian and have eschewed meat. And I must say that when I pass a butcher's shop, which looks usually to me now like the result of a terrible motor accident, I am pleased that the British sausage is not included in my diet. It has, I know, a very small proportion of the carcasses of animals in it. Mostly it consists of breadcrumbs, wheat germ.
Kenneth Williams' challenge.
Breadcrumbs, wheat germ.
Yes, I agree, Kenneth. 33 seconds, no, 32. The British sausage starting now.
Amelia Bloomer loved a British sausage. In fact, she always said, apart from Ali's comet, she'd rather have a British sausage than she'd have a marshmallow. And all power to her elbow, I say. After all, isn't individuality the very essence of what this nation is famous for? And bangers!
Gyles.
Deviation. Amelia Bloomer was American. I don't wish to be pedantic. If Kenneth really feels he must go on, of course he can.
was on about the British sausage being that's what he was trying to convey, and that's the message he got across to me. So I'm sorry,
I
Gyles.
felt that his dissertation on this woman was far-fetched, to say the least.
I agree, Peter, but he still wasn't deviating to
No
my
more
mind.
far-fetched than Gyles Bram was about Haley looking...
Oh, well, I'm not even mentioning Gyles Brandon. He gets quite enough publicity already.
Only one who said ha-ha on the programme and got away with it for not repeating. Right, there are 12 seconds for you, Kenneth, to continue with the British sausage, starting now.
The British sausage is best gingered up with a little mustard. Now, some prefer ketchup, which they pour liberally over the British sausage, but I think that takes away from the flavour.
So, Kenneth spoke as the whistle went, gained an extra point, got other points in the round. He's still in third place, but he's catching up on Peter Jones, who's just behind our leader, who's still Gyles Brandreth, and Gyles begins the next round. It's having my hair done. So, Gyles, will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
When I go to see my barber, who incidentally is the great-grandson of the First World War poet Siegfried Sassoon, he often says to me, "How do you want your hair cut?" And I say to him, "Preferably in silence." My younger brother has got long hair down to his shoulders, and then he wonders why he's got split ends. He's a nice enough fellow, very easy with Christmas presents, one giant tube of Valderma, and that is him done for the year. And sometimes he and I...
Derek Nimmo challenge, yes, Derek.
Deviation, he's talking about his brother's skin complaints rather than having his hair off. Not at all. Not at all. And if you'd waited a moment, I didn't want to discovered about him and me going together, about his punk hairstyle, and the little orange bit, and the little spots to the right. But no, it's your turn. No, it's for you. Give it all away. No, give it back to him and then see what he's got to say. No.
Oh, they're all so polite.
Yes. So, Derek, we grant you the benefit of the doubt, and there are 35 seconds on having my hair done, starting now.
Very difficult to find a barber these days. We have hair stylists.
Peter Jones' challenge.
Quite easy to find a barber. You've only got to walk along any main street, and there's always a barber around.
But my point was that they call themselves hair stylists now.
Yes, but they are barbers. That's what they call themselves. Hair stylists or unisexual manipulators of hirsute, whatever it is.
So I don't think he was deviating, really.
You don't?
No.
You don't think it's...
I think it's a good challenge, but not enough to... I've got to make this... All right, I'll put it to the audience. If you agree with Peter's challenge that you can't find barbers easily these days, you cheer for Peter, and if you disagree, you boo for Derek Nimmo, and you all do it together now. Right, Derek, they think that it isn't as easy to find barbers as it was, so you continue with the subject, having got a point.
I didn't know we had an audience of hairdressers.
They've all just come from that establishment. 31 seconds left, starting now.
They used to have names like George and Fred and Rocky, and now it's Cecil and Maurice and Louis the Blade. And I rented this one.
Kenneth Williams challenge.
There are 3 ands.
Oh.
Cecil and Morris and on and on, didn't it?
Yes. That's a correct challenge, Kenneth. You would be absolutely livid if somebody had had you on a challenge like that. But it is correct, and there are 24 seconds for you on having my hair done. Tell us all about your golden locks, as you've told us so often on the programme, starting now.
I'm a very classy man, and he was called Jose Moreno, and I sort of called in English, that'd be Joe Brown. And
Chip Gyles' challenge.
That was the third and in under 4 seconds.
Oh, did I say that?
So, Gyles, you have back having my hair done, and there are 16 seconds left, starting now.
Meditation.
Kenneth, there are 15 seconds on having my hair done, starting now.
Well, I like to sit there thoroughly relaxed, and in Ceylon, when it was done for me, they used to massage my shoulders, and I think this should be done.
A Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of I.
Oh, it's getting a bit too tough now. If you eyes and hands and so forth. But it was the correct challenge. So, Derek, you have 7 seconds on having my hair done, starting now.
Massage my follicles, I cry. And they leap towards me, sheets of the ready, put them on top of my skull.
So, Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went, gained an extra point. But for once, he is still in 4th place. Kenneth, you begin the next round. The subject is Garibaldi. Will you tell us something about him in the game, starting now?
Well, the great liberator of modern Italy as we know it was Garibaldi, and there is a street in London where you can see a plaque erected to his memory, and of course he gave his name to those delightful biscuits which contain little raisins. I have often found them delectable, and shove them into the tea and eat them with a great smacking relish, and think I feel every bit as satisfied as learning that a nationalised industry has been returned to its rightful owners. And indeed about those Risorgimento, which was
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, you see, it's actually currants they put in the biscuits, and not raisins. And I let him go on in the hope that he might say something interesting about this great and good man. But alas, he didn't.
Well, I do think in 35 seconds he managed to get in not only a political comment, a historical comment, a personal comment, and also a culinary one. But in spite of that, I agree with your challenge. And there are 22 seconds on Garibaldi, starting now.
This great and good man was, as I say, not only the inventor of the biscuit and popularizer of the red shirt, but when he retired, having achieved...
Kenneth Williams, a challenge.
I think it was rather a
definite hesitation.
He seemed to me to lose himself. He seemed to be dithering, hopelessly dithering.
But you were the one who picked it up first, so you have 10.5 seconds to tell us about Garibaldi, starting now.
Oh, Garibaldi, they used to shout, because he hadn't got very much hair, you see, and that's where the term comes from. That's where the word.
There you go, challenge.
Deviation, rubbish.
He's only jealous, he's jealous because of my hair.
But he hadn't established he was talking about the original Garibaldi. He was just saying Garibaldi could be another Garibaldi. So he wasn't really deviating from the subject on the card. So, Kenneth, you keep going if you want to for another 3 seconds on Garibaldi, starting now.
When he came down from Piedmont in the Italian Alps.
So, as the show progresses, we have an interesting situation. Kenneth Williams is creeping up on our leader, Gyles Brandreth. He's only 1 point behind him now. Derek Nimmo, it's your turn to begin. The subject is bricklaying. There are 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
Bricklaying, I suppose one of the most interesting and unlikely bricklayers of the present century was Winston Spencer Churchill, who, when he was down at Chartwell, was always putting bricks upon other ones to construct walls. He found it extraordinarily therapeutic, and I do know what he means. I sometimes feel that I myself am a reincarnated bricklayer, because I found that when I first started bricklaying, that I could pick up the bricks and put them one on top of another, and I knew exactly what to do without any kind of instruction at all. I didn't look at any do-it-yourself books or go to any manuals of any kind. I just found that I was an instinctive bricklayer. And this, to be able to associate myself with this great Prime Minister, man of a noble family, and to find that we had something in common after all. And the one thing I've always noticed about most...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
A repetition of in common.
10 seconds on bricklaying, starting now.
I do notice that bricklayers always seem to be in demand. If you look through the columns of wanted ads in the newspapers, bricklayers are offered quite a large amount of money. And...
Peter Jones got some points in that round, as well as the one for speaking as the whistle went. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this particular programme. Let me give you the final score. Derek Nimmo, for once, finished in 4th place, but it's good when it all gets moved around. We have different winners each week. It shows you how balanced the whole thing is. Kenneth Williams did extremely well, came in 2nd place, only 2 points behind this week's joint winners, which were Peter Jones with our guest, Gyles Brandreth. We hope that you have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute and want to tune in again next week when we take to the air and we play this delightful, impossible, and to some people ridiculous, but to us entertaining game of Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
We present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Barry Cryer, and Elaine Stritch in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And this week we have 2 of our regulars, Kenneth Williams and Clement Freud. We welcome back a guest who has appeared a number of times on the show, Barry Cryer. But we're also delighted to welcome a guest who has not played before. She's had the courage to come and pit her wits and her talent against these 3 intrepid players of the game. It's that lovely actress, Elaine Stritch. And as usual, I'm going to ask them in turn if they can speak on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. Barry, the subject is kangaroo pie. Would you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Kangaroo pie is an Antipodean delicacy, particularly favoured in the outback.
First you catch your kangaroo, saving Clement's presents, which I am doing for Christmas. The creature should then be placed in a large bucket immersed in a judicious mixture of Australian...
Kenneth Williams is challenged.
Deviation, you couldn't possibly get a kangaroo into a bucket. Rubbish in the life. Absolute rubbish. He said the creature should be placed in the... How can you place a creature?
Actually, especially if you try to do it before killing it. Which he hasn't killed his kangaroo yet, it's still alive.
Still shouting malfeasance.
So, Kenneth, I agree with your challenge. There are 41 seconds for kangaroo pie with you starting now.
Yes, will you get this? Any importer will supply it to you. Somebody's making an awful lot of rustling noises up there. Please
Barry Crouch.
Deviation, rustling.
Rustling noise have got nothing to do with kangaroo pie. So, Barry, you have 34 seconds on kangaroo pie starting now. Clement Freud's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes.
Here.
Clement, you have 33 seconds on kangaroo pie, starting now.
Putting a live kangaroo...
Barry Crouch.
Repetition of hesitation.
Considering he hasn't started yet, he couldn't. It's a mad game, isn't it, Elaine?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Clement, you have 32 seconds on kangaroo pie, starting now.
Putting a live kangaroo into a large bucket is probably the most humane way of making kangaroo pie, otherwise produced by catching the beast, skinning it, taking off the bones, cutting the meat into small squares and marinating them, usually overnight, in a judicious mixture of malfeasance, oil, lemon, vinegar, and monosodium glutamate.
Deviation, malfeasance can't be part of a recipe.
My mother said it could.
A judicious mixture of malfeasance. I mean, it's rubbish.
My mother used to make
These
malfeasance
people have come a long
pudding.
way. They want to see something decent. They don't want to sit there and have their intelligence insulted with the recipe consisting of
Kenneth, I
malfeasance.
agree, you can't, but
We'd wait for Saturday night for malfeasance pudding. That's what my mother used to make. That was the treat.
Right.
You've got malfeasance on the brain, you have.
There are 8 seconds for you to take over the subject of kangaroo pie, Kenneth, starting now.
This would be made most deliciously, of course, by none other than Elaine Stritch. Because...
Clement Freud is challenged.
I don't accept that.
You don't accept it.
Elaine Stritch is a conservationist of a high order and wouldn't kill kangaroos to make pie.
But you might make a pie if someone else killed a kangaroo. We don't know. Would you?
Well, I don't know what to do in this game, honestly. I've never been so terrified in my whole life. They taught me how to play the game, or thought they did. Now I have to say whether I would be in a kangaroo pie or have anything to do with making... No, I would not, if that's going to clear this game up.
I don't think anything will ever clear this game up.
Well, it has nothing to do with loving animals. I don't want to eat a kangaroo. Elaine... I'd much rather see Barnum. I mean, this is ridiculous. When is it my turn?
We give Elaine a bonus point for her contribution to the show. And another point for having let me off the hook on my next decision, which is that Clement Freud was correct, and who challenged who? It was such a long time ago. Oh, yes, you said...
I challenged him.
That's right. So you go on for another second, Clement, on kangaroo pie, starting now.
You can get it in tins in Melbourne.
So at the end of that round, Clement Freud was speaking as the whistle went, and he's gained the extra point. He's gone 1 ahead of Barry Cryer. He's 2 ahead of Kenneth Williams, who's equal with Elaine Stritch, who hasn't scored any points, but she's been given to by the chairman. And, sorry, Elaine, it's not your turn to speak yet, but, yes, Clement goes next.
All right.
So, but, Clement...
I just feel a little inhibited about interrupting somebody before I've made it.
I wouldn't be. The rest of them are not inhibited. The audience aren't even inhibited.
Okay.
Nobody's inhibited in just a minute.
No, thank goodness they haven't got any buttons.
The future's going to be called the Mal... No.
Hurry up, say something.
I had a little malfeasance in my throat and I was clearing it. Clement, the subject is what makes me fall about laughing. And there are 60 seconds starting now.
One hardly needs 60 seconds to describe what makes me falling about laughing, because in a word...
Barry Cryer,
What makes me falling about laughing?
Yes. You're going to go on grammar again, are you?
Grammar again.
A slender thread.
It also wasn't the subject on the card, so I think you've got a very good point there, Barry. And there are 53 seconds on what makes me fall about laughing, starting now.
Tommy Cooper makes me fall about laughing with his fez, his feet, his face, his...
Kenneth Williams.
Three hisses.
Three hisses, yes.
Quite right. Quite
And
right.
so, Kenneth, you have the subject with 46 seconds left. What makes me fall about laughing, starting now?
It is unquestionably Frankie Howard. I remember him talking about going down to Chequers. And he said, I was trying to get in there to see Macmillan, you know, the lovely spread he's got there. Beautiful place. Goes with the job, of course. And he wouldn't come. I was shouting through the letterbox, but he never appeared. And I thought it conjured up this wonderful picture. Of course.
Lane Street, you've challenged.
I can't hear you. Or understand you, Kenneth. I really can. And I think it is a cheat. I meant to say something about Kenneth. He has a wonderful gimmick on this show.
Oh, yes.
Well, you see, he makes one word into a 3-act play. And I think it's the greatest gimmick. And you can't challenge him on it, but that I just take. I don't mean to be unkind or anything, but I just couldn't hear.
Oh, don't worry. Don't be inhibited. Everybody is in this show.
But I'll get used to it if I'm asked back.
But he did repeat the word there, which
Oh, well, that has nothing to do with it.
It has everything to do with it.
You can't help her.
No, you can't help her. She's so noble, isn't she?
I know, it's truthful.
No, he's all like that, and I couldn't understand him, and I don't think that's fair.
But Elaine, he did repeat the word there 3 times.
Well, yeah, of course, that we all know.
So therefore, you have a correct challenge, and you get a point for that.
What are we talking about?
I'm going to tell you in a moment. You have 26 seconds to try and talk on the subject of what makes me fall about laughing, starting now.
Well, I'm going to agree with Barry Cryer. I don't think I can ever remember in all the times that I've lived in America or in this country of ever laughing at a comedian like Tommy Cooper. One night I was sitting alone in my room at the hotel, and I was watching a television show, and I think one of the strangest things in the world is to laugh when you're all alone, out loud. I think it really is a example of really thinking something is funny. So I'm watching Tommy Cooper, and he said, I was sitting in a dentist's office the other day, and he said, I was reading a magazine, and the dentist told me that the secretary of the dentist, nobody's challenging me. So.
You're welcome.
I almost challenged myself. I said, I couldn't believe it.
People have been known to do that and get points for it, actually. But Elaine, you kept going magnificently for about an hour and a half, and you fully deserve the point for...
Well, anyway, I've got to tell you what Tommy Cooper said.
Oh, yes.
He said, and all that business. And then he said, I was sitting in the dentist's office the other day. And then he said, I had to wait 2 hours. And then there was a long pause, and then he said, isn't that terrible about the Titanic? I don't know, that takes a lot of explanation. But have you ever read the magazines in a dentist's office? They're old. But anyway, I know. And that's what makes me fall about laughing as opposed to this show.
Elaine, you get a point for speaking when the whistle should have been blown by Messiter.
But I
You
won.
also get a point for sportingness.
Right.
For being such a great sport, which the audience show their appreciation. And you are now... You might be surprised to hear that you're now in the lead. Alongside Barry Cryer and Clement Freud. And Kenneth Williams isn't far behind, which is a dangerous position for him to be. Elaine, it's your turn to begin. And
it's my turn to... Now I'm going to get boring. I can feel it.
Elaine, the subject is keeping my figure. And you have 60 seconds starting now.
I think keeping your figure is very important, both.
Clement Freud is challenged.
It's keeping my figure.
It doesn't matter. She can still say keeping your figure and go on the subject. She doesn't have to say keeping my figure. Start off with the words on the card.
Direct deviation of the subject.
You cad.
You can't be so generous and ungallant.
We were very
I got 2 laughs and you're mad at me. I just don't understand.
You got more than 2, Elaine. And you got another point for an incorrect challenge. And it's so mean, you've only been going for 2 seconds. You have 58 seconds to continue on keeping my figure starting now.
Is, I think, the most important thing in the world. Not only for a man, a woman like myself, but for men. When I was growing up, I think it was one of the most important things in the world to me to be thin. I was almost to the point of anorexia because I wanted to be an actress, and I thought that all actresses had to be very, very thin because someone told me once that when you went on the screen, you put on 10 pounds automatically, whether you weighed more than that or whether you didn't. And so don't do this to me again because I'm telling you, if I don't play one shot at this guy, I don't want to deviate either. I want to stay right on the subject. And when I really found out the absolute causes for putting on weight, they really began to bore me as I got older because I used to be a very extreme human being in everything that I did. When I liked something, I would eat too much of it. When I liked something to drink, I would eat... I'm repeating myself all over the place. But it's a terribly interesting point, and I don't care. You see.
Well, Ian Messer did blow the whistle then at the end of 60 seconds. It's an amazing long time to talk, isn't it?
It is, but not really be honest with me. I repeated myself, didn't I?
You did, yes.
No, the only thing... I would complain that you're not decipherable. You can't be heard properly. You've got to be like me. You speak very plainly, you see, and enunciate. You've got to enunciate. That's what you've got to remember.
But listen, Kenneth.
Tell him.
I don't want to go home and then have this show broadcast and then say, how was I? And somebody would say, well, they were very nice to you. That really isn't going to cut well with me, so I want to be treated just like the rest of the gang. Right.
Actually, I can tell you something, Elaine. They've actually treating you rather toughly, because that's a mean thing to do, what they've done.
Right.
And they only do that to people that they not only love, but people they know they're good at the game. Yeah. And
you did it to Barbara Castle.
Well, all the time I thought it was because I was attractive, Nicholas. And I'm going to keep that thought and go home with it. So the hell with all of you.
That actually goes without saying, Elaine. I didn't think I had to mention it.
You sycophantic. Look at him.
Okay, let's go. I want to challenge somebody. I won that point, too.
You won that point,
okay.
But I want to say something in case you weren't aware of it. You can repeat the subject and the words on the card if you wish.
Oh, well, then maybe I did it well.
You did it very well, because you didn't repeat them either. Right. So, Elaine, at the end of that round, you have increased your lead. You're now well ahead of Barry Cryer and Clement Freud, and infinitely well ahead of Kenneth Williams. And, Kenneth, it's your turn to begin. Now, the subject Ian Mester's brought along for you now is Quetzalcoatl. Will you talk on that subject for 60 seconds, starting now?
Quetzalcoatl is, of course, an Aztec deity, and the lovely thing about it is the modern Quetzal takes its name from it because of this lovely plumage.
Clement Freud has challenged.
2 lovelies.
Yes, I'm afraid so. So, Clement, you have a point at the subject, and you have Quetzalcoatl starting now.
Quetzalcoatl is not a subject which I would have chosen given a totally free choice. It is one of the few words...
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
The subject is Quetzalcoatl, not what he'd chosen for a subject.
Yes, Kenneth, but he was establishing
No, we don't want a load of rubbish like that. Come on, play the game properly. He's deviating horribly.
I'm doing my best.
About Quetzalcoatl.
That's what he was talking about.
He wasn't.
He said he wouldn't have chosen that subject, and that is the subject.
Well, it's the subjects you're supposed to discuss, you great fool.
What do you want to say?
I've come all the way from Great Portland Street. I made a fool of. I've made a fool of.
Anybody go volume control?
Yes, they have said that to me. Yes, you're clever.
Clement, you continue for 43 seconds on Quetzalcoatl, starting now.
Like Iquique and Albuquerque, New Mexico, it is a word that only has the opening letter occurring once, whereas in the other two, as you will have noticed, the 19th letter of the alphabet happens on more frequent occasions. If you go to Brazil...
Yes.
Well, hesitation, I suppose.
Hesitation, he came to a full stop, yes.
I wanted
he suddenly
Kenneth
realised when he said Brazil instead of Mexico. So you have the subject back of Quetzalcoatl. 21 seconds starting now.
Well, of course, it was the great ornithologist Ludwig Koch who... to see the Quetzal in all its great exotic splendour. And they said, you have to sit for 7 hours in the rainforest. And he said, I'm not going to get wet for a load of reasons. There was umbrella.
Clement Freud challenged you, though.
Oh, yeah.
It was a repetition.
Yes. Of what?
Ha, 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 ha.
Oh, God. Dear me. Clement, you have a correct challenge in 2.5 seconds on Quetzalcoatl starting now.
One of the great problems about tourists in Mexico looking...
Well, at the end of that round, Clement Freud got a number of points, including one for speaking as the whistle went, and he's now gone 1 point ahead of Elaine.
Nicholas.
The laughter is because of the byplay that's going on between Kenneth Williams and Clement Freud at the moment. And
I
Barry...
wasn't anything of the kind. I've blown a kiss to the producer.
Well, I think you should keep your private life off the show. Barry, you want to say something?
Next time, see?
I just wondered if there are any points for spotting that Ludwig Koch was mentioned 2 weeks running.
Yes, but you see, the thing is, this audience weren't here.
That's why I'm telling them.
It was many weeks ago when Ludwig Koch came
I think
into
this
the
audience should be told that Ludwig Koch has been...
I should explain to this audience then that Kenneth Williams in another programme which went out many weeks ago mentioned about Ludwig Koch sitting in the rain jungle. And Ian Messiter's blown his police whistle and arrested me, so we'll get on with the show. Where are we? It's Barry Cryer's turn to begin. The subject is dice. Barry, will you tell us something about that in the game? 60 seconds starting now.
Dice, of course, is a plural word, die, the singular, the great game of chance, known in the occasionally United States of America as craps, casting the die...
Clement Freud is challenged.
Hesitation.
No, I don't think so. He did repeat the word die, but you didn't spot that one. So there are 44 seconds for Barry to continue with dice, starting now.
Casting the die has nothing to do...
Clement Freud challenged.
Repetition of die.
Yes, the third time.
I would agree there. Yes. I would agree there.
So, Clement, you have the subject. 42 seconds. Dice, starting now.
Dice is the airport serving Aberdeen, and as such, one of the great growth areas of Scotland. If you get to Dice, it's only 9 miles into the granite city, which now bounds...
Kenneth Williams,
Two cities. So the city of Aberdeen, and then he said city again.
That's right, he did, Kenneth, and you've listened well, and 29 seconds are left for you to take over the subject of dice, starting now.
I say, this dice ain't nice, said a very fat lady at a party to which I was invited. They were throwing it for this game, which was called, as I remember... No, now it fails me, but I do...
It failed him. And you can't throw a dice.
Well, he was deviating, wasn't
Rubbish. Rubbish.
You can't throw a dice.
At this party where this woman said, this dice ain't nice. That's how I always remembered it. And it was a game, and I was going on to say about how they played the game and all the rest of it. Oh, no, there was no deviation.
I think there was, so...
Positively glowing, and the audience all agog with interest.
Well,
The
Barry,
gog.
in spite of the gog...
Very titular. That's why they keep falling forward, you see.
Barry, I agree with your challenge. You have the subject. There are 11 seconds on dice, starting now.
One remembers Sky Masterson in Guys and...
Kenneth Williams, a
Does
challenge.
one remember Sky Master? I don't remember Sky Masterson at all. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, he needn't bother to have existed.
I said one remembers. Are you one?
Well, one assumes. You should be laughing, that's rude.
Elaine, what did you want to say?
Nothing, I just got nervous.
Barry, I agree with your challenge.
I was one in the sense of I, that's all.
You have 7 seconds on dice, starting now.
Singing Luck Be a Lady Tonight, accompanied by the chorus, the stage swirling with figures, colours, and the wonderful...
Well, it's turning out to be a close and interesting contest. Kenneth Williams is trailing a little behind Elaine Stritch, who's 1 point behind Barry Cryer, has now leaped forward to be only 1 point behind our leader, who is still Clement Freud, and he begins the next round. The subject is the most important thing in my life. Will you tell us something about that, Clement, in the game, starting now?
This is really very boring because the most important thing in my life is my family, and nobody wants to hear about my family. I could say my
Elaine
family
Stritch has
several
challenged.
times.
I do.
Repetition of family. Well done, Elaine.
Yeah.
Very good. And you have 53 seconds on the most important thing in my life, starting now.
I think the most important thing in my life is the fact that I am sitting here and doing this show and...
Clement Freud has challenged.
Hogwash.
Well, I hadn't made my point yet.
So what is your challenge?
Let her continue.
Well, he challenged me like I challenged him, because I don't think his family is boring, and he doesn't think that this is the most important thing that's happening,
right.
but he didn't let me finish my point.
No, he could have had you for hesitation, but he didn't. So you get a point for an incorrect challenge.
Okay.
Because you weren't deviating, and there are 45 seconds on the most important thing in my life, Elaine, starting now.
Because I just can't begin to tell you how many things are wrong in my life, but I also must say, in a great hurry, that there are things in my life that I'm so thankful for, and the most important thing in my life, which I understand I can repeat over and... So I'm going to repeat it again. The most important thing in my life is that I'm sitting here doing this show, and I am healthy and feel marvelous. That is what I think we all should think about over and over and over when all...
Clement Freud challenge.
I wanted her to feel like a contestant. Repetition.
You're contesting over?
Repetition
and over.
I know. Well, go on. Tell us about your family.
Nobody's ever played this game like her.
Well, I'm very glad you asked. Now, to begin with, there's my wife, whose name is Jill, who's an actress, and we have 5 children called Nicola, Ashley, Dominic, Emma, and Matthew. 2 grandchildren called Tom and Jack, a budgerigar, a hedgehog.
He was correct when he said nobody wanted to hear about his family, because nobody buzzed him when he stopped. Actually, the 60 seconds was up just as he did pause, so he does get a point for speaking as the whistle went. And I have to tell you that, unfortunately, we've come to the end of this hilarious show. So, are you sad about that? You just stay all night. Well, it's been great fun, hasn't it? And it's been lovely having such an unusual and original performer as Elaine Stritch, because her contribution was...
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you.
No, your contribution has been... Yeah. Elaine, you've challenged. What was your challenge?
I repeated myself.
Let me give you the final score. Kenneth Williams, who sometimes wins and tries very hard to win, but always gives great value, unfortunately finished in 4th place.
I've lost my title.
Barry Cryer, who was with us a number of weeks ago and got a lot of practice from that, almost won, but he did finish up 1 point behind Elaine Stritch, who was in 2nd place, not having played the game before, but she was 2 points behind this week's winner, who is Clement Freud.
Yay!
Well, we do hope you've enjoyed listening to this program as much as our audience appear to have enjoyed in the studio, and certainly as much as we've enjoyed playing it. And we hope that you'll want to tune in again at the same time next week. We'll take to the air, we'll play Just a Minute, and who knows what will happen. Tune in, find out. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by Pete Atkin.
Present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud, and Derek Nimmo in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And alas, this is going to be the last show in our present series. And we have our 4 regulars who are going to compete and bring this series to the climax I'm sure that they can achieve. And once again, I will ask them to speak, if they can, on the subject that I will give them, and they will try and do that, as usual, without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject on the card. And we'll begin the show with Derek Nimmo. Derek, the subject is things of mine refused by garbage collectors. You want to make a note of it? All right. So that's the subject to start this last last show in the series, and you have 60 seconds beginning now.
I rather like having subjects like the things of mine refused by garbage collectors, because you are allowed to repeat that line, the things of mine refused by garbage collectors. And if you get a long question like this, it occupies most of the minutes you're trying to speak. Now, some of the things of mine that have been refused by garbage collectors include an old crow's nest, garden refuse, cart wheels, rabbit hutches.
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation was a good try, but entirely unfounded. I'm sorry, Clement. And Derek, you keep the subject, and you have 37 seconds starting now.
One of the things of mine that was refused by garbage collectors was an old pair of knickers that had once belonged to Mrs. Nicholas Parsons that I'd been given for Christmas in 1952. And quite rightly, when they came round, they absolutely were totally adamant and refused to take this away. I complained to the council about it, but...
Deviation, this is disgraceful.
It's true.
I happen to know the lady in question. She wouldn't give him an old pair of hers anyway. I think the whole thing is devious.
Kenneth, I agree about the deviation, and you have a point for a correct challenge, and you take over the subject of things of mine refused by garbage collectors. 19 seconds starting now.
Nobody in England could have had anything refused by garbage collectors, because they're not called that over here. In fact, it's a mistake to have it on the card at all. But I did have trouble in getting rid of a bedstead. I pointed out that it could have been refurbished, made very nice, polished up, and I said, you can make a bob of it.
When Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. It was, of course, Kenneth Williams, and I think you probably worked out he's in the lead at the end of the round. Clement, will you take the next round, the subject, the cocktail? Will you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
In the country, in the long winter afternoons, hens gather around to listen to the cocktail. all sorts of chickens of all varieties meet and sit and perch on straw and hay and corn. And along comes the male of the species and says...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
The deviation, he said it was winter, and they couldn't be sitting on the corn in the winter.
Why not?
Well, it wouldn't be grain, would it?
Well, the corn could have been thrown on the ground by the farmer to feed them.
Oh, all right, yes.
I mean, he's not technically deviating, though it was a good attempt. Clement, with 41 seconds on the cocktail starting now.
You can also mix almost any quantity of drink, whether it be spirituous, vinous, or reinforced, and the resultant liquor poured into a glass, cooled, sometimes with froth added, is known as a cocktail, and many barmen in hotels and restaurants throughout the world have reached fame and fortune by inventing their own concoction. Campari, vermouth, Romanoff, cherry, and peanut have all become part of such delicate beverages.
Peter Jones challenge.
Peanut hasn't.
I didn't know. No, I quite agree. Peanut cocktail, I quite agree, I think.
Oh, yes, it is. Oh, yes.
Is that?
Peanut colada. Very good.
Really?
So, I agree with your challenge, Peter. You have 6 seconds on the cocktail starting now.
I think by far the best cocktail is the dry martini. That is 4 parts of gin or possibly vodka.
Well, Peter Jones is speaking as the whistle when he gained the extra point, and now he's equal in the lead with Kenneth Williams. And Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject, losing money in a telephone box. Starting now.
Well, it's one of the most frustrating ways of losing money that I know, because unless you write to the people or they take your name and address of the operator, then you can't get the money back. And this does seem to be very unfair. Now,
Kenneth Williams challenge.
Deviation, he's telling the audience, when things chance simply not true. You simply get the operator and say that you've lost your money, she gets you the call free. I mean, it's rubbish to say.
But you can't actually get your money back. That's what he said. You can't
get your money back. You want your call, don't you?
Yes, but you may not get your call, and then you still can't get your money back.
Well, anyway, I stabbed the subject. He was very dreary about it, and I think that's
He may be dreary, but I don't think he was actually deviating, so, Peter...
Well, I admit to being dreary, but that's never been any hindrance on this game. As Kenneth Williams has proved time and again.
Peter, you still have the subject, and there are 43 seconds on losing money in a telephone box starting now.
There are some people whose only source of income is going...
Clement Freud, challenge.
Representation of people.
Yes, I'm afraid you mentioned people before.
Oh, I did, yes.
So, Clement, you have the subject with 41 seconds on losing money in a telephone box starting now.
The very easiest way to lose money in a telephone box is to have a hole in your pocket and a crack in the floor of the aforementioned telephone box. That way you will never get it back. And 10p pieces as well as...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
What kind of advice is this from one of from a member of Parliament? He's advising us how best we can lose money? I think it's dangerous.
So what is your challenge?
Deviation.
Yes,
he's right.
But he still wasn't deviating from the subject. So, Clement, you still have the subject with 27 seconds starting now.
I knew of a woman who was so determined not to lose money in a phone box that she had coins from all sorts of foreign countries, which she bombarded into the slots which were provided for that purpose. And when the operator said, "Will you now put your cash into the allocated portion of the machinery," she started bombarding.
Kenneth challenge.
Oh, we had the bombarding before.
No, we had bombarded, not bombarding.
In any case, there were an awful lot of repetitions and an awful lot of rubbish was talked. I mean,
an awful lot of wriggling out of tight situations. No, you're right, actually, he did say bombarded, and now he's saying bombarding.
That's right.
Yes, oh dear, he's very...
So it's really a repetition of bombard.
That's right, yes. But it is the whole word in just a minute, I'm afraid.
I know it is, yes.
3 seconds.
2 out of 3 is not bad.
3 seconds, with you, Clement, starting now.
I shall write to the authorities and inform them of the fact.
So Clement Freud was speaking on that occasion as the whistle went, gained the extra point, and he has now taken the lead. Derek Nimmo, your turn to begin the subject, Citizens Band Radio. Can you tell us something about that in the game starting now?
Well, I can tell you very little about Citizen Band Radio because I'm not very interested, and I think it's an extraordinarily boring idea. Why should you want to converse with other people in neighbouring motor cars when you're driving along a highway? It seems to be totally pointless. And they call each other with names like Rubber Duck and Nelly Welly and things, and you have to pay money to join this thing. Now that it's licensed, of course, nobody's interested anymore. When it was illegal, there's a certain danger and excitement about it, and that's why people presumably had this Citizens Band Radio. But goodness gracious,
Peter Jones' challenge.
Repetition of people.
Yes, I'm afraid there was. He was going at such a pace. He was doing magnificent. I don't know how you're going to keep it up, Derek.
Well, I would have done it and buzzed me.
Peter, you have a correct challenge. 33 seconds are left for Citizens Band Radio starting now.
Well, I agree with Derek Nimmo that it is an unnecessary addition to one's list of electronic gadgets. And I think, like the electric carving knife, the toothbrush, and other things...
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
No, I think an electric carving knife is absolutely essential.
I don't mind what you think. He wasn't deviating from the subject.
Ah, right, never mind.
It's not if you're a vegetarian, as I am. Quite unnecessary.
No, he's entitled to
Can use it in upholstery, I understand, but I don't do any of that either.
He's entitled to express an opinion without deviating. So, Peter, you still have the subject, and there are 21 seconds. Citizens Band Radio starting now. Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, you have the subject. There are 19 seconds on Citizens Band Radio starting now.
Clement Freud is probably much better equipped to discuss this subject than I am, since he was in the house which made the things legal. Now, I think Nimmo is right.
Peter Jones' challenge.
I think he admits that Clement Freud is better equipped. I think he should hand the subject over to him.
If I may say, the subject is not Clement Freud's equipment, it is Citizens Band Radio.
I know it is boring, and he should pass it on.
Well, he wasn't deviating from the subject in the card. He can express his opinion about Clement Freud as you were on the electric carving knife. So, Kenneth, I leave it with you, and there are still 7 seconds. Citizens Band Radio starting now.
Derek and...
Derek Nimmo.
You said Derek Nimmo twice.
I didn't. I said Nimmo before. I did not say Derek.
Didn't say Derek Nimmo.
Oh, right.
What your ears out, mate.
No, it's much better if he doesn't, because then you get more points for incorrect changes.
Right.
Yes.
Excellent.
Kenneth, you still have the subject, another point. 6 seconds. Citizens Band Radio starting now.
My dear friend opposite, who was in the amorous fraud, and of course Peter, have already...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of course.
I don't remember him saying
No, I never said that.
He always says it.
He always puts that in because he thinks that he'll always get away with it.
Yes.
Right. Take no notice of it, Nicholas.
I don't think you said it in this round.
Here.
You may have said it many times before.
I'd quite like to talk about CB radio.
Well, let's Kenneth finish the subject. 1.5 seconds. You couldn't say much in 1.5 seconds about it. Yes. Kenneth, 1.5 seconds to go, starting now.
Well, it's the MPs that made it all right.
So what did you want to say, Clement?
I shan't just give it away like that.
Right. Well, what I will give away is the fact that Kenneth Williams not only got the point for speaking as the whistle went, but he gained a number of points in that round, and he has leapt into the lead. Which pleases him and the audience, and the next subject is a bad practical joke. Clement Freud, it's your turn. There are 60 seconds as usual, starting now.
The scenario for a really bad practical joke would include a chicken, a duck, turkey, parrot, cow, horse, dog, cart, and 14 characters which I shall describe as the...
Very Nimmo, John.
We failed to describe
it. Yes, you failed. So a pause, the 42 seconds for you, Derek, on a bad practical joke starting now.
I was concerned with what turned out to be really a rather bad practical joke. We were doing Blythe's Theatre play by Neil Card in Hong Kong, and we decided to go to an island called Lantau for the day. Now, a chum of mine, or rather my son, was a speed police inspector on this island, and when we arrived, I'd arranged with him that he would come and arrest...
Kenneth Williams, John.
To islands.
No.
An island twice.
No, he said I arranged.
It's an island. Went to an island, and then he said again about the policeman on this island. So
yes.
was said twice.
You have the subject of a bad practical joke. There are 25 seconds starting now.
This actually happened. A friend of mine went into Fortnum & Mason, asked for a very expensive box of chocolates, then said to the assistant, now squash 'em all. And he said, but why, sir?
Clement Freud challenge.
Deviation.
Why?
It's rather good practical joke.
I think it's a horrible practical joke. Terrible, don't you?
Can I get on?
Yes. Very bad practical joke. There are 13 seconds for a bad practical joke, Kenneth, starting now.
When the assistant questioned this...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of assistant.
But I couldn't because I said, in the other one I said, why, sir? And he left me no alternative.
I know, but
Right. I'd like to hear what happened. That's what I did.
Well, the assistant... But the assistant said, why do you want to squash? And he said, because I'm taking my girls to the pictures, and in the dark she'll say what's soft centres and what's hard centres. And if they don't squash, she'll know anyway, won't she?
So, thank you for the joke, Kenneth.
It wasn't a joke, it's true. Tommy Steele did it.
Well, it was still very funny.
Of course it was. That's why he's Tommy Steele.
But Clement Freud had a correct challenge previous to that with 11 seconds on a bad practical joke starting now.
You wait until you see some Irish labourers digging up Piccadilly and go to the police station and say, excuse me, but there are from the Emerald Isle across the channel some gentlemen who are using spade and shovel with which to disturb the macadam on the pavement of a main thoroughfare of the metropolitan city of London.
Deviation. You never have macadam on a pavement.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah.
But actually, we'd gone past the 60 seconds because I wanted Clement to finish. I thought it was a bad practical joke. It just turned out to be a boring old story, didn't it? So actually, to be perfectly fair, he had gone beyond the 60 seconds. I thought we were going to get to his payoff.
But how are we supposed to know if you don't blow the whistle?
You're not.
Am I losing a point because I made an incorrect challenge?
No, you haven't made an incorrect challenge, but you made it after the 60 seconds. So, Clement Freud, blow the whistle now, Ian, and then we know the whistle has gone. It should have gone about 5 seconds ago. Clement gets the point of speaking when the whistle should have gone, and we move on to...
I always think a really bad practical joke is that one of Barry Humphries, who opens tins of cold vegetable salad, puts them on aeroplanes into the sick bag in front of him, then eats it out with a spoon. I would have to ask.
Most of our audience have either gone home or looking for the bags in front of the seats. At the end of that round, Derek Nimmo, for once, is trailing in fourth place, 1 point behind Peter Jones, a little way behind Clement Freud, and in a very definite lead in this last show in the present series is Kenneth Williams. Peter Jones, it's your turn to begin. The subject is the Rubik Cube. Can you tell us something about that in the game, starting now?
Well, I think this, in a way, is a bad practical joke because it's got everybody going and baffling people all over the place. It's made a fortune, of course, from the man who invented it. And I understand...
Kenneth Williams,
what is his grammar? It made a fortune from the man that invented it. What do you talk about? You mean for the man, don't you?
For, I said. Didn't I say
no,
for?
you said from.
You tended to say for, and it came out... It wasn't quite for, but... you know, if we don't allow a little bit of grammatical...
Well, would you do that impression again, Nicholas? I rather enjoyed that.
What? I'm on your side, Peter. Don't push your luck too hard.
You're on my side?
Yes. So I got to give you the benefit of the doubt, Peter, because you've got to keep going somehow in this game. And you still have the subject, another point. And there are 48 seconds starting now.
And I believe that he's working on something similar to follow it up. Now, if I had made many millions of pounds by producing something that people bought in every country...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of something.
Yes, I'm afraid you did, Peter. Yes. So Clement has the subject with 37 seconds on the Rubik Cube starting now.
What you really need to solve the Rubik Cube is an enormously fast wrist action. I saw on television not very long ago the Rubik Cube World Championship, won inevitably by someone aged 15 who simply was double-jointed in both arms and probably hadn't got a brain in his head, which is what is required for solutions of this order.
Kenneth Williams' challenge.
Deviation, he said he probably hasn't got a brain in his head. Well, it's ridiculous. All human beings got a brain in their head. It's ludicrous thing to say. It's quite deviation. It's wrong to have our listeners believe that people couldn't have a brain in their head.
Well, he didn't actually want to say that. He was using a phrase which conveys that he was very agile with his hands but wasn't particularly intelligent.
Well, it's a terrible slur. How do you know?
Oh, terrible slur.
What a disgusting thing to say, Nick. I saw this program in question. I thought he was a particularly intelligent youth.
So did I.
And for you to say that the boy was...
But that wasn't your challenge.
That's what you said. I think you ought to clear this up.
Your challenge was that every human being has got a brain in their head.
I think I'm right.
No wonder they're not bringing Just a Minute back again, I can tell you. And the chairman can say things like that.
Yes.
And get away with it.
No, I think he wasn't deviating. He was using a phrase that you might have used yourself at any time. So, Clement, you still have the subject with 13 seconds. The Rubik Cube starting now.
Red, white, yellow, green, black, brown, orange.
Deviation, these are just lists of colours. It's nothing to do with the Rubik's Cube. Just listing colours. I'm not talking about the cube at all. Anyone could do that. Talk about the rainbow, say red, white, pink, blue, rubbish.
Yes, but you couldn't go on for a minute.
Yes, just hangs it out in order to gain the last few seconds and win.
If it said, agree, Kenneth.
I don't worry about marks. I just come in.
I think...
Kenneth, I agree with you. If you had said the Rubik Cube consists
Precisely.
Instead of just going off in a little...
really.
Chairman, isn't he?
I mean, really, all these colours. They've got to have these colours. You couldn't do the cube.
Oh, shut your mouth. He's given his verdict. It's only to wake up people like you.
It's only the Irish that have an all-white Rubik Cube.
I know those are the colours of the Rubik Cube, but in this game...
Well, if you're talking about the rainbow, wouldn't you mention the colour Richard of York gave battle in vain? Wouldn't you use that?
I was saying that he should have established it was the Rubik Cube that had all these colours, and Kenneth has a good challenge, and he has 10 seconds on the Rubik Cube, starting now.
I am not the authority on the Rubik Cube that you would probably wish to hear. Obviously, people like Nimmo and young Peter Jones.
Nimmo challenge.
Deviation, not young. Not by any...
Peter, do you consider yourself young?
I don't think that's got anything to do with the subject or the game.
Well, I know, but that is the challenge, that you're not young.
Well, put it to the audience. Is Peter Jones a Rubik Cube?
You did say early on that one was entitled to express an opinion. I know this was Ren's departure.
I know.
From previous rulings of the chair, but really there's no reason why William shouldn't think that Jones is young.
No, you see, he was comparing this to himself. And naturally, as one gets older, one thinks...
All right, I'll let the audience judge. If you consider that was a nice phraseology as a kind gesture to Peter Jones, then you cheer for Kenneth. And if you consider that it was a deviation because it's not true, then you boo for Peter, and you all do it together now. Kenneth, you have another point, and you have half a second on the Rubik Cube starting now.
The Rubik Cube.
I must say, it's not the youngest audience I've ever seen.
You should take it as a compliment, Peter, because it was being used as a form of endearment. The audience do not
kind of
consider that you are old, and but it leaves you trailing a lot.
It does.
Derek Lim is trailing behind
Unfortunate coincidence. Yes.
But Kenneth Williams is doing magnificently. He's increased his lead again at the end of that round, and he also begins the next round. And it's a lovely subject Ernesto thought of, tombstone collecting as a hobby. Can you tell us something about tombstone collecting as a hobby, Kenneth, in the game starting now?
There is a town in the United States which is called Tombstone, and there are a number of collectors there, resident, and the things which these people have chosen to hoard are really quite extraordinary. Now, there was a documentary film made about it, and it showed you all these people in the town.
Derek Nimmo,
reputation of these people.
Yes.
Well, it's such a petty thing, Derek. I mean, if you're going to do that kind of thing, it makes the game ridiculous. People could do it an and or a so. I mean, it's petty.
Kenneth, it wasn't petty.
Well, you wouldn't think so, because you are.
No, it was a correct challenge, and Derek takes over the subject with 36 seconds on tombstone collecting as a hobby, starting now.
This is something which is given to the collection of the...
Kenneth Williams. Oh, yes, you're right, Kenneth. 32 seconds, tombstone collecting as a hobby, starting now.
Now, I know people that do this and make...
Clement Freud challenge.
That's people for the third time. Another petty repetition.
No,
but
I
you
didn't
probably
say...
think people are not important.
Clement. By the way, I must tell the listeners, he looked at Kenneth when he said people are not important. He didn't accuse me of that one.
Well, of course, we don't consider you as people.
Oh, gosh, it's the last of the series. It's all coming out, isn't it? So, Clement, I have agreed with you, a correct challenge. 31 seconds, tombstone collecting as a hobby, starting now.
The only acceptable hobby would be to collect unused tombstones, such as are given or sold to undertakers in order to mark respectfully the graves of people who are deceased or dead, as I like to call it. There are many persons...
Peter Jones's challenge.
Hesitation. He said,
He didn't.
He did say, but he...
What?
He
said, didn't he?
He did say, yes.
Isn't that a hesitation?
I don't think he really hesitated, you know, enough.
Well, why did he say, I mean, that is,
If you say, you always call that a hesitation. What's the difference between and an
Oh, right. I'll tell you what I'll do. It's the last round of the game. It's the end of this particular series, and we've heard from everybody on this subject.
Series. This is the end of Just a Minute.
Might be. And it may be the end of our careers, for all we know.
Well, you have, Peter, you have 13
collecting will become a necessity.
You have 13 seconds to try and put that right. Is on the subject of tombstone collecting as a hobby, starting now.
Yes, it's quite illegal to pick them up from...
I think probably you're going to be challenged for hesitation, Peter.
Yes.
Was that right, Derek?
That was
right.
Yes.
So we're going to hear from you on tombstone collecting as a hobby with 9 seconds to go.
I once collected a tombstone, the inscription of which was, "Here lies the grave of Elizabeth Charlotte, born a virgin, died a harlot. She was virtuous, I at 17, a very rare thing in Aberdeen."
So Derek Nimmo brought the round to a close with a flourish, and I think has brought the contest to a close with a real flourish. And now I will flourish it all out by giving you the final score, which is Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones equal in third place, a little way behind Clement Freud, but way out, a very strong and definite leader, and our winner this week, Kenneth Williams. Taking the tablets. And that was Ian Mester saying, keep taking the tablets. From our producer, Pete Atkin, and myself, Nicholas Parsons, we hope you've enjoyed the show, the series, and will want to be with us again when we hope we'll be back on the air playing Just a Minute. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The program was devised by Ian Mester and produced by Pete Atkin.